The region could not endure another cycle of destruction.
And yet, we now risk descending into a rat hole of retaliation after retaliation. To avoid it, diplomacy must prevail. Civilians must be protected. Safe maritime navigation must be guaranteed. We must act immediately and decisively to halt the fighting and return to serious, sustained negotiations on the Iran nuclear program.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Cholani Tulongwebe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Our sports headline, Hayley Matthews stands tall as West Indies square T20 International against the Proteas women. And 10-man Real Madrid Mexican side Pachuca to take a big step towards the FIFA Club World Cup knockout stages. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
Well, it's just gone 6 o'clock, and as we do every day after the 6 o'clock news, we begin your day with the Africa Roundup. And this is a concise look at the stories that played out across the continent, particularly in the last 24 hours. And our team of experts, reporters, analysts bring all of that into context for us. And we begin this roundup with news of Zambian President Hakainde Hichilema, who's reaffirmed his government's wish for the late former President Edgar Lungu to be laid to rest in Zambia. This comes amid an ongoing dispute over funeral arrangements. Hichilema made the remarks during talks in Lusaka with a South African delegation led by Minister of International Relations Ronald Lamola.
Our wish has been very clear that we would like the mortal remains of President Lungu, our sixth president, to be buried in his home country, Zambia, and not in any other country. And I think these are the issues amongst many we've discussed, and we're grateful to President Ramaphosa for his graciousness and his government, the people of South Africa. We continue seeking a solution, a civilized solution, I must say, with two sister countries, brother countries. We're one people, actually. South Africans and Zambians are one people. We have different laws that apply in our countries, South Africa and Zambia, but we want to see if we can bridge those issues. And I'm very happy with the meeting we've had, and cordial, quite illustrative, hearing each other out.
Prominent Rwandan opposition leader Victoire Ingabire remains in prison following her arrest on charges of inciting public disorder and forming a criminal organization, a state investigative agency said. Her lawyer claims the arrest is politically motivated. Sean Hogan reports.
She is being held at a detention facility in the capital, Kigali. Ingabire heads the unregistered opposition party Delfa Umurinzi and returned from exile in the Netherlands to contest a presidential election in 2010. Ingabire was freed in 2018 after serving 6 years of a 15-year jail sentence following a conviction on charges related to conspiring to form an armed group and seeking to minimize the Rwandan genocide. She is now accused of playing a role in creating a criminal organization and engaging in acts that incite public disorder, the Rwanda Investigations Bureau said in a statement.
In East Africa, Kenya, 2 men have been sentenced to 30 years each in prison for their role in the 2019 Al-Shabaab terror attack on a Nairobi hotel complex that claimed 21 lives. The pair were found guilty of aiding and abetting the assault, which was carried out by the Al-Qaeda-linked group.
Delivering her ruling, Judge Diana Mochache said that without their involvement, the attack may not have happened.
Had the first convict not facilitated the procurement of false student identity cards, the two terrorists would not have easily traveled from Dagdale refugee camp to Nairobi without detection. Similarly, terrorists need money and people to commit offenses. They need finances for their activities, for planning and survival. Had the second convict not facilitated the funds, the attackers would not have been able to sustain themselves in Nairobi, a very expensive city.
Africa's push for local currency payment systems is finally making concrete gains, bringing the promise of less costly trade to a continent long hobbled by resource-sapping dollar transactions. But efforts to move away from the dollar face strong opposition and the threat of retaliation from U.S. President Donald Trump, who is determined to preserve it as the dominant currency for global trade.
The continent's commercial banks typically rely on overseas counterparts. The so-called correspondent banking relationships facilitate settlements of international payments, including those between African neighbours. It adds significantly to transaction costs that have helped make trade in Africa 50% more expensive than the global average, according to the UN. Systems like PAPSS allow a business in one country to pay for goods from another. Both the buyer and the seller receive the payment in their local respective currencies, rather than converting them into dollars to complete the transaction. Launched in 2022, PAPSS is today operational in 15 African countries.
4 gay men in Africa have tested positive for HIV following US cuts to funding for programs that supplied a drug proven to prevent transmission. The cuts ordered by President Trump have raised concern about rising infection rates after years of progress. Zachary Gulman picks up the report.
Until recently, Echezona was one of millions of Africans taking pre-exposure prophylaxis, or PrEP. PrEP is normally given as a daily pill, and the U.S. Centers for Disease Control says it can reduce the risk of HIV transmission through sex by 99% when taken consistently. According to UN data, sub-Saharan Africa had 390,000 AIDS-related deaths in 2023, or 62% of the global total. But progress had been made. That death toll was down by 56% from 2010, according to the World Health Organization. That drop in deaths occurred at a time when PrEP use ballooned across the continent. According to the global tracker PrEP-Watch, the number of patients who had taken at least one dose of the treatment leapt from fewer than 700 in 2016 to more than 6 million by late 2024. And access to PrEP are now testing positive for HIV, according to 10 patients, health officials, and activists.
And that's how we come to the end of today's Africa Roundup. We'll have more for you tomorrow after the 6 o'clock news. Stay with us. Coming up shortly, we'll be joining one of our regular commentators, Mighty Jamie. We'll be talking to Asanda about the big events of the week that was.
Africa at Play with NATO and ETO Chairman.
The Confederation of African Athletics CAA President Mr. Hamad Kalkaba Malboum talked to us about the state of athletics in Africa as it stands, and what picture are you looking at 5 years later?
Yeah, athletics in Africa is strong. We are able to organize our major events in time. Like this year, we will have the under-20 and under-18 African Championship in Nigeria. Next year, we will have the senior in Ghana. In 2027, we will go back to Algeria to organize the under-18 and under-20. And then 2028, we will have the senior championship in Gaborone in Botswana. Well, by this program, we can increase our performance. And at the same time, we are considering the fact that within the British Federation, they are identifying young talent every year within their national program, within the scholarship championship. And so the athletics in Africa is in good standard.
Live every Saturday and Sunday from 2 to 5 p.m. Central African Time. Africa, meet Abedi.
Yeah, that's me.
Abedi is a music lover through and through.
I really love African music.
He's got a taste for all kinds of tunes and spends his days listening to Channel Africa. Guess what? He didn't know.
Okay.
Channel Africa wants to help Abedi and all music lovers everywhere to discover even more incredible music. That is why Channel Africa is calling on all African musicians to submit their music. musicians, remember to give us all your relevant information. Make your submissions at music@channelafrica.co.za. Submissions are your chance to be heard on radio. But sadly, they do not guarantee that you will be playlisted. All submissions will be carefully reviewed to see if they meet our station's requirement. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
16 minutes past 6 Central African Time. Let's get into the section now of the show that's called the Roundup Wrap. So this is where we invite our resident analyst, Mighty Jamie, to talk to us about some of the stories highlighted earlier, as well as throw forward to the week ahead, getting more deeper into those stories. Good morning, Jamie. How are you on this Monday? It's the 23rd of June. Can you believe it already?
Yeah, the year is moving quite fast along. So I'm good, and good morning to the listeners and the viewers.
Great. Always great having these catch-up sessions with you. Today, let's start in Zambia. Don't know if we say Zambia/South Africa, where Zambia's former president, Edgar Lungu, who died earlier this month in a South African hospital from an undisclosed illness, will be buried in South Africa rather than his home country. So his family made the decision amid a deepening diplomatic and political rift with the Zambian government over funeral arrangements. Can we still see it to be a dignified farewell after this tense standoff?
Well, I think it's a controversial life and a controversial funeral, you know, in keeping almost with Edgar Lungu's legacy. Because if you recall, when he was president, one of the big issues that arose was his treatment of Hichilema. You know, Mmusi Maimane, in fact, actually almost got arrested at the airport when he was trying to go and protest and visit Hichilema when Hichilema was arrested. So Lungu presided in a notorious and controversial fashion, and now he has gone to his final resting place in a controversial fashion. So I think the legacy of this particular funeral will be such that it is in keeping with how he lived. And we saw on Thursday, the Zambian president Hichilema said that, you know, a former president belongs to the nation of Zambia and his body should be buried in Zambia with full honors and not in any other nation. And many people were of the view that that should have been the case and not the South African burial decision. And I think when you look at the ground in Zambia, the sentiment was predominantly that people would have wanted their former president, despite the differences that he had with Hichilema, to also be buried in Zambia. But as we know, it's not going to be the case. It's caused a lot of friction amongst the South African diplomatic corps as well as the Zambian diplomatic corps. But fundamentally, everyone has to work with the confines of the family's decision. It looks as if the family also chose South Africa because that would limit the amount of control and influence that the Zambian president, current sitting Zambian president, would have on the decision. But it's definitely a controversial decision.
How might this burial dispute fare or make Zambia look in terms of its political climate, but also the president, Hichilema? How does he look?
Well, I think Hichilema didn't come out of this looking worse for wear, if you will, because he took the principal position. It's the same principal position that Lungu himself took when he was burying other presidents, that no, you can't say because you don't like the president, you're not going to be buried at the presidential resting place. That has to be a tradition that is honored. You have to be buried within the country where all the other presidents lie. So because he continued with the national line and the national position, and in fact, he seemed to be very gracious and magnanimous in that he was willing to continue with that. I think he comes out looking good. The PF party, the opposition party within Zambia, because they supported Edgar Lungu's position, because they were actually blaming Hichilema for the death of Edgar Lungu. I think with the people of Zambia right now, they may have come off a little bit on the wrong side of this particular issue, and it may affect them electorally. They don't have their leader. They've taken this position, which was not really in keeping with African customs and keeping with African norms. And, in traditional societies, and as much as we are modern within the African context, there's a lot of traditions that we still value, and burial traditions are one of them. And I think because of the way everything played out, Hichilema, I don't think came out looking bad, but I do think that the Lungu family, the PF party, did come out looking bad to the Zambian public, because everyone remembers that Lungu insisted on burying other presidents at the Zambian burial site.
Can anyone blame the family at this stage if you say they look bad to the Zambian community?
Well, look, it's difficult because you have to honor the wishes of the person who passed away. So at a family level, they honored the interest of their father, their grandfather, their husbands. You can't necessarily blame them at the family level, but this is not a family issue exclusively. It's an issue which also concerns a sitting former president, and to be quite honest, he was not the most ethical dude, but as a family, maybe you overlook that. He was arresting people. Hichilema spent time in jail. Hichilema was campaigning for president for I think 20 years, and most of that time the person who gave him the most grief was Edgar Lungu, and in fact he seemed to have been resentful that finally Hichilema was able to win. So it's at the family level. I understand the logic, because why would you want your enemy to have this final, win over you, and you don't want him to have the satisfaction of having buried you? But at the national level, at the customary and cultural level, I think that the Lungu family went the wrong direction with this.
Let's move to Tunisia now, where a court in Tunis has sentenced former President Monsef Mazouki, his ex-advisor Imed Daimi, and lawyer Abderazak Kilani to 22 years in prison in absentia on undisclosed terrorism-related charges. So 2 others also received the same sentence. What do we know about this? The terrorism-related charges are undisclosed.
Yeah, so what we know, for instance, is that democracy has been declining. There's been what is known as a democratic backsliding within Tunisia, particularly since the emergence of the current president, Said. And since 2019, we've seen a variety of things happen that have been inconsistent with democratic principles. And, in 2021, we saw the freezing and the seizure of parliament, the reformulation of the constitution in 2022 to basically give the Tunisian president more powers, more authority. And one of the things that he's doing in the consolidation of that authority is to remove the people who could potentially be challengers to him. As things stand right now, there's a lot of ground support for Monsef Mazouki, who is somebody who was a doctor, a human rights activist, an author. He served as the 3rd president of Tunisia, that interim president just after the Arab Spring from 2011 to 2014, before they had their first official election. And, for many people, looking at that elective period after the Tunisian Revolution, the Arab Spring, they viewed him as somebody who was running the country when the economy was positive, when everything was really looking on the up and up for Tunisia. So because they view him also as someone who led the Tunisian League from 1989 till 1994 and was consistently fighting the dictator in Tunisia at the time, Abedin Ben Ali. So when they looked at his trajectory and life, they were like, okay, maybe this is the guy we need to come back, right? He's in exile right now. Others are in exile as well. So looking at that life, they were like, okay, this is somebody who we think could come back and rule the country more effectively if there were to be another election. And that is viewed as a threat by the current president. Poverty levels have increased in Tunisia from 26% in 2012 to 40% in 2024. The inflation rate right now is at 7.2%, and previously, if you look at the time of the Arab Spring, it was at 3.5%. So Kais Saied right now has really been persecuting a lot of people who are within the frame of opposition, community leaders, journalists. Even the fact that these hearings were held in an absentia, this is against the principles of law. You have a right to a fair hearing. You have a right to be able to, in public, be able to respond to accusations made against you, cross-examine your accusers, look at the whole body of evidence, exculpatory and implicatory type of evidence. But all of this has not been done. So we cannot really give these trials any, shadow of legitimacy even, or any glimmer of legitimacy, because they are in and of themselves a continuation of the consolidation of power by somebody who is now emerging to be another Robert Mugabe type of character. It's very surprising that Kais Saied would become this type of a leader, because he was a constitutional law professor, but he's used that knowledge to actually change the constitution in ways that benefit him, not in ways that build democracy for the people of Tunisia. As things stand right now, even the parliamentary elections, which were held in 2022, only 10%, 11% of the electorate showed up to participate in that vote because they viewed that election of the new parliament as not being legitimate. That's where things stand in Tunisia right now, and this is a continuation of that democratic backsliding, so to speak. And it's such a tragedy because, as we all know, the Arab Spring initiated out of Tunisia. Somebody immolated themselves, burnt themselves to death, fighting for better civil rights and progress. But unfortunately, that has not been the case. And we stand now at a point where the first transitional leader post the Arab Spring is now being charged in absentia for things that he has not been able to respond to, and things that look like an extension and a continuation merely of a power grab by the sitting president.
Let's shift to Rwanda and the DRC. They set to sign a peace agreement this week, raising cautious hopes for stability in the conflict-hit eastern region. This being supported by international partners. The deal is obviously ending or aiming to end years of violence driven by rebel groups. Are you hopeful?
Well, you know what? I've been very surprised by this particular development because it's something that has happened under the Trump administration. I didn't think that they would be able to pull it off, but it looks as if they are interested on the Tshisekedi side to actually resolve this issue in a way that doesn't lose him any power, and also on the Rwandan side to maintain their relationship with America. So if you look at Tshisekedi, he has been unable to deal with the M23 situation using the DRC forces, the FADRC. And as a result of that, he has been looking for somebody who can help him really mitigate and stop the threat that is posed by Paul Kagame on the Rwandan side, who has been supplying the M23 rebels with artillery, who has also been saying that he's doing so because of the treatment of Tutsis in the DRC. So what Tshisekedi has done is to make a deal with the Americans that they're going to get them to be in the country mining. America is right now not a real big entity in the mining space in DRC. You've got Glencore, you've got China, you've even got some South African companies which are doing very well in the mining sector in DRC, but America has been absent. So Tshisekedi made a deal with the Trump administration that he'll get them in on the game, rare earth minerals, cobalt, you name it, offered it. And as a result of the relationship that the Americans have with Rwanda, then I think they were able to put pressure on Rwanda, because Rwanda does rely on a lot of American support as well. So even though there has been conflict going on for decades, even though many have tried, it looks as if this is finally going to be the day that the deal comes into fruition. And this draft agreement, which is meant to be signed this week on the 27th, contains provisions on issues relating to the disarmament, the integration of these non-state armed groups. We're talking about the M23, return of refugees and internally displaced people from various refugee camps in Uganda as well as in Rwanda itself. So it looks as if Paul Kagame is somebody who wasn't necessarily going to agree to terms if they had been requested by other people. But because the Americans made the request, that seems to have been very progressive and successful. In fact, it's very surprising. The U.S. Senior Advisor for Africa, Masad Bolos, I think is how you say his name, he's been very effective in dealing with these issues. His son is married to Trump's daughter, Tiffany, and he seems to have a strong relationship within the Trump administration. If you remember when Cyril Ramaphosa was in the White House, they actually introduced Ramaphosa to him, talking about how the great things were happening in Africa. And it looks as if he has been more successful than perhaps many African diplomats would have anticipated.
Well, it remains to be seen in terms of the challenges that may arise and how they try and mitigate against those, because they obviously will be challenges. This has been ongoing. But we'll leave it on that point for this Monday. Mighty, thanking you for your time, and I'm hoping that you have a great week ahead.
My pleasure. Good week to you and to all the listeners and viewers.
Thank you so much. Mighty Jamie, our resident analyst, giving us a roundup wrap in terms of stories that have been making headlines in and around the continent, and an overview of the week. 30 minutes past 6 Central African time. Let's say good morning to Jwalane Tulongwepe. She's got our news headlines.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Making headlines, the family of Zambia's late President Edgar Lungu is expected to announce the funeral arrangements this week. Lungu will be laid to rest in South Africa, becoming the first former head of state of another country to be buried in another country. Officials in Algeria say 3 people have died after falling from the upper stand of a stadium just after the final whistle as local football team MC Alger won the league title. And finally, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says his call for peace in the Israel-Iran conflict just 2 days ago had gone unheeded, describing the United States bombing of Iranian nuclear facilities as a perilous turn in a region that is already reeling. I will have details on these and other stories at 7 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
It's time now for our first look at the world of sport. And at the desk this morning is Figile Lingwati. And the World Club Championships is underway, and I've got to tell you, Mamelodi Sundowns gave Borussia Dortmund a run for their money, didn't they, Figile?
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good morning and thank you, Peter. Yes, they did. They showed who they are from South Africa. Yes, they have learned their lesson. I think they'll do better. Let's talk about that. That's happening in America. Real Madrid shrugged off an early red card to defeat Mexico's Pachuca 3-1 and take a big step towards the knockout stage of the Club World Cup on Sunday. The result leaves Madrid under new head coach Xavi Alonso on top of Group H with 4 points, while Pachuca are eliminated after 2 defeats. Saudi club Al Hilal, who held Real in the opener, faced second place Salzburg later. And the Spanish Giants were in trouble after just 7 minutes when Raul Asensio was shown a straight red card after he pulled down a Salomon Rondon with a Venezuelan clear on goal. That left the Liga side MX team sensing the chance for an upset in front of 70,000 fans at home at the NFL's Carolina Panthers. Now, cricket news. Hexley Matthews produced a captain's innings to guide the West Indies to a 6-wicket victory over the Proteas women in a low-scoring second T20 international at a 3Ws Oval in Barbados, levelling the 3-match series at 1-1. In response to South Africa's total of 113 for 6 from the allotted 20 overs, Matthews anchored the Windies' chase with an unbeaten 63 of 56 balls, including 5 fours and a 6. Despite the best effort of Nonkululeko Mlaba, who returned figures of 2 for 17, the West Indies reached their target with 4 balls to spare. Proteas coach Mandla Mashimbi says they're disappointed.
Disappointing that we lost the game, and I think we just didn't score enough runs. We didn't adapt well to the conditions. We came with a lot of confidence based on how we played the last game, but I think the conditions played a big role. We just didn't adapt well enough to make sure that we get ourselves into a score that's going to be competitive. However, you know, the bowlers, the way they went about their business, and to take it to the last over, that's a big positive for us.
Mashimbi says they've done well with batters throughout this tournament, but they take good lessons going forward from this loss.
I think we've been playing spin quite well throughout the tour, you know, and maybe today they came with a different plan. They bowled slow and wide, you know, and our guys couldn't quite respond to that in a way that was going to be positive. But again, that is learnings that we take out of it, and we look at the options that we can take against that type of bowling. But overall, I think we've been playing spin rather well. So today we just took the wrong options, and obviously we lost wickets regularly. We couldn't string any partnerships together. But I'm pretty confident that tomorrow will come and the girls will be ready.
Now, tennis news. Carlos Alcaraz warned his Wimbledon rivals that he feels great on grass after the world number 2 defied his own expectations by winning the Queen's Club title for a second time. Alcaraz battled to a bruising 7-5, 6-7, 5-7 tie, 6-2 victory over Czech world number 30th Jiří Lihenčka in the final of the Wimbledon warm-up event. The 22-year-old has extended his career best winning streak to 18 matches, putting him in the perfect position to defend his Wimbledon title. And let's end with golf news. US Ryder Cup captain Keegan Bradley won the Travelers Championship for the second time in 3 seasons. A dramatic last-hole birdie denying England's Tommy Fleetwood his first PGA victory. Bradley, trailing Fleetwood by 1 at the 18th tee, dropped his approach to 6 feet while Fleetwood was shot off his green, left himself a par putt from just inside 7 feet, then missed it to the right. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fidel Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Let's check in now with the world of business. Here's Tabiso Lehuku with our first economics news update.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Asanda, and good morning. The ongoing conflict between Israel and Iran risks pushing up fuel prices if it intensifies. South Africa's Mineral and Petroleum Resources Minister Gwede Mantashe says if the war intensifies, it could be difficult to move oil, leading to higher prices. Israel and Iran have been exchanging strikes for about a week, leading to devastation and adding to global economic uncertainty. Mantashe comments.
There's a body called OPEC. OPEC is a collection of all producing countries in the world, and that is where we get our oil. But the reality of the matter is that if that conflict intensifies, it's going to push the price of petrol up, and people must expect that it will push the price of petrol up because moving oil is going to be much more difficult and more complex than it was earlier.
The Lungelo Letu Foundation has lambasted South African banks for selling properties at a fraction of the market worth to recoup costs from defaulting home loan holders. The foundation has accused the banks of initiating legal action for repossession even when homeowners are actively reducing their areas. They say by imposing excessive legal costs on homeowners that the legal fees end up surpassing the actual home loan debt. The foundation is part of a group leading the 60 billion rand class action against the major banks in the country. Its president, Nkululeko Oluthole, says the banks are failing to engage meaningfully with customers before resorting to court action.
It's terrible when people are being repossessed of their houses. We're dealing with thousands and thousands of people who have lost their houses through auction. And before 2018, houses were sold at footstools. But from 2018 August, we took the banks to court, whereby the houses now must be sold at its current value.
Delegates at the 2025 Commonwealth Trade Ministers Meeting and Business Summit in Windhoek, Namibia, have agreed that global trade is facing headwinds. Trade ministers, diplomats and stakeholders had gathered to review the outcomes and plan the next steps for implementation. The meeting officially concluded on Friday. Samoa's Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Fiame Naomi Matafa.
The Samoan Prime Minister and Chair in Office, in her opening remarks to this distinguished gathering, called for a united response, a Commonwealth response to the key challenges we face, especially on the escalating geopolitical and trade tensions and the challenges confronting the global trading system.
The Democratic Republic of Congo has extended by 3 months a ban on exports of cobalt intended to curb oversupply of the electric vehicle battery material. The world's top cobalt supplier imposed a 4-month suspension on exports in February after prices had hit a 9-year low at just $10 a pound. The ban expired on Sunday. In a statement, the Authority for the Regulation and Control of Strategic Mineral Substances Markets said that the decision has been taken to extend the temporary suspension due to the continued high level of stock on the market. Shares have slipped in Asia, and oil prices briefly hit 5-month highs as investors anxiously waited to see if Iran would retaliate against the U.S. attacks on its nuclear sites, with resulting risks to global activity and inflation. Early moves were contained, with the dollar getting only a minor safe haven bid and no sign of panic selling across markets. Oil prices were up around 2.8%, but off the initial peaks. Optimists were hoping Iran might back down now its nuclear ambitions had been curtailed, or even that regime change might bring a less hostile government to power there. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 547. Botswana 13 pula 33. Kenya 128 shilling 568. And Zambia 23 kwacha 9. The BRICS countries in Brazil, the dollar there will cost you 5 ril 51. Russia 78 rubles 39. India 86 rupees 49. China 7 yuan 18. And in South Africa, the dollar will cost you 17 rand 99 cents. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Gold at $3,361. Platinum $1,267 per ounce. And Brent crude oil is at $78.29 a barrel. For any business stories you would like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg, I'm Tabisolo Hoko.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
Right, let's get into our G20 fact for this Monday, the 23rd of June. Did you know that the G20 does not have a permanent secretariat or staff? Instead, the G20 presidency rotates annually among the members and is selected from a different regional grouping of countries. The 19-member countries are therefore divided up into 5 groups, comprising a maximum of 4 countries each. That's our G20 fact for this morning.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
World Refugee Day was commemorated this past Friday under the global theme Solidarity with Refugees. While commemorations were taking place around the world, in Pretoria in South Africa, an event took place this weekend. Do you want to take us through the package?
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Yes. And we spoke about World Refugee Day as it was actually happening last week, Friday. So now we take a look back in terms of those commemorations. Botswana will begin issuing ID and travel documents to refugees and asylum seekers. Minister Nelson Ramawatwana announced during World Refugee Day at Dukwi Refugee Settlement. This move fulfills commitments made at the 2021 Global Refugee Forum to support displaced people. Channel Africa's Shingirai Madondo has more.
Pledges made by Botswana in the 2021 Global Refugee Forum to review the Refugees Recognition and Control Act, including refugees in the National Development Agenda, to issue identity and travel documents, as well as integration of protracted cases and unencumbered minors and individuals at risk of being stateless. In his keynote address during the World Refugee Day commemorated at Dukwi Refugee Settlement, situated some 560 kilometers northeast of Gaborone, the capital of Botswana, Botswana's Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Nelson Ramotwana, said in Botswana, every person seeking asylum is entitled to fundamental rights and freedoms, including the opportunity to be heard.
Just recently, the Ministry of Justice and Correctional Services took a deliberate decision to remove rejected asylum seekers from indefinite detention in the Francetown Center for Illegal Immigrants to refugee settlement here in Dukwi. The relocation in itself does not mean that we have overturned the decision to reject the application for asylum, but rather to stand in solidarity with refugees in accordance with our constitution, which prohibits arbitrary detention without trial.
Furthermore, Ramotwana said Botswana will issue refugees and asylum seekers living the neighboring country with identification and travel documents.
The ministry has progressed very well in attaining the pledges made in the Global Refugee Forum. The act has been reviewed and will commence as soon as administrative structures have been established. Identity documents and integration is dealt with by the Department of Immigration and Citizenship. And I am optimistic that we will be able to issue travel documents to refugees before the end of this financial year.
Early this month, Botswana relocated about 469 asylum seekers from a detention center situated in Francistown, Botswana's second largest city, to Dukwi refugee camp. Despite the challenges of limited resources, Ramotwana said there are many ways as government of Botswana where it will continue to demonstrate solidarity with refugees. Speaking at the similar event, the Refugees Welfare Committee Chairperson Johnson Mukeyo applauded Botswana for standing in solidarity with refugees and asylum seekers.
On behalf of Dukwi refugee community, we would like to extend our deepest gratitude to the government for relocating the rejected asylum seekers from the Center for Illegal Immigrants to Dukwi refugee camp and allowing school children to get access to education. We indeed attest to the fact that this is the government of human rights. We are therefore saying, Asante sana, Rialebo. Thank you.
World Refugee Day commemoration started in 1974 when it was known as Africa Day by the then Organization of African Unity, now African Union, to draw attention of the international community to the resilience of refugees, asylum seekers, and the internally displaced in Africa who flee their homes due to war, conflict, or political persecution. Reporting for Channel Africa from Dukwi refugee camp here in Botswana, this is Ashingra Matondo.
That's a report there from Botswana, and as we've been hearing, World Refugee Day was commemorated this past Friday under the global theme Solidarity with Refugees. Here in South Africa, in Pretoria, an event there brought together refugees, government officials, civil society organizations, and a host of communities for a day of reflection, cultural exchange, and shared commitment to inclusion. And amongst some of the themes this year was the role of sport in building bridges between communities. And this is part of a broader shift from short-term humanitarian assistance to long-term sustainable support for refugees. A new UNHCR report released to mark the day also shows that despite growing displacement globally, more countries are now stepping up with policies that include education, employment, and access to services for refugees. So what does this all mean? particularly in Southern Africa. Well, joining us now is Jan de Bishop, who's External Relations Officer at UNHCR's South Africa Multi-Country Office. Thanks so much indeed for joining us, Jan. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. Good morning, and thank you for having me.
So Friday was a big day for you and your team. What would you say was the central message from the UNHCR that it was hoping to communicate through this year's World Refugee Day events in South Africa in particular?
Well, thank you, Peter. As you already said, the overarching theme was solidarity, and I think despite, and I think it's no secret, despite what you hear globally, the narrative globally, that solidarity at the personal level is certainly still there, and at the community level, I think. To give you maybe a figure, ahead of World Refugee Day, we did a global study, and there it says that 75% of people, including also in South Africa, is still very much in favor of providing protection to people who are forced to flee their country because of violence and persecution. So our overarching message was solidarity is still there. And then basically our second message is we also have to put that into action, that solidarity.
Well, let's talk a little bit about action, because solidarity can mean many things. What does it mean practically when we say solidarity with refugees?
Well, practically, I think you could see it at different levels, I think. First of all, at the personal level, because any way you put it, solidarity, it is an individual or a personal choice. And to put it into action at the individual level is very simple sometimes. It doesn't cost you anything. It's listen to refugees, hear their concerns, hear their stories, welcome them. The same thing at the community level, because we as UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, we provide protection to refugees, but people often forget that the first line of response is the community. It's the community who receives the refugees. And then at the level of organizations, we saw it at our World Refugee Day event, there's private sector companies stepping up, governments doing the right thing, despite, as we all know, some governments refuse to act these days. And that solidarity is still there at so many levels. And people are putting that into action. There's governments providing the right policies. I heard part of your show about Botswana, human rights policy. South Africa definitely also is trying to put in place the right human rights-based policies. Private sector companies are providing employment for refugees. Or are providing, and I think that's something we should all do, is provide people who are entitled to protection because they had fled war, persecution, provide them with the same opportunities we all have. Refugees do not want a special treatment. They don't want additional opportunities. They just want the same opportunities.
What stood out for you personally on that day? Were there any moments that show the human face of displacement?
Yes, I think we had Dr. Tabani, who's there, and I think he's a refugee, and he made a very what I thought very interesting and very right call. He says, solidarity in action works both ways. It means that communities and individuals and governments should put solidarity in action, but also the refugees. Refugees should also take the chances they are given. They should actively work to integrate in their communities. So it is a two-way street. He says it is okay, refugees can ask for solidarity, but communities, governments should also ask for that solidarity and that action from refugees themselves. And he said, don't be to refugees in the room, and there were a lot of refugees in the room. He said to the refugees, please also step up and contribute to your communities, one way or another. We all have qualities, we all have talents, and he made that call to the people in the room. Use your talents and your skills to contribute to the communities who have so warmly welcomed you. So that was a moment that stood out for me and was also very much appreciated by the refugees.
So we've seen the UNHCR push for more sustainable long-term solutions. How is your office working with governments and local actors in the region to try and achieve these longer-term sustainable solutions?
Well, the country context is different. So the operational context is different. I think the situation is different in Botswana than it is in Namibia, and the situation is also different in South Africa. I think let me maybe focus on South Africa, because in the region it has, after DRC, the highest number of refugees and asylum seekers. There we are working with the government, and very much supported and driven by the Ministry of Home Affairs to take away the uncertainty of refugees and asylum seekers. And that's by working on documentation. Because, let me be frank, a functioning and effective asylum system only works if people who are entitled to refugee protection because they are being persecuted, fleeing from war, are given the right to asylum. It also means that people who do not qualify for asylum and do not fit those criteria will eventually need to be returned to their countries of origin in safety and in dignity. So we are working with the government to take away that uncertainty, because that's also what the refugees want. They want to have certainty on where to literally take their lives. And that is something which is a major focus of our office here in South Africa. So work on that. It's maybe not the most sexy topic, documentation, but it is the basis for livelihoods, health, education, renting a space, a house, and so on. So we are working to focus on that specific aspect together with the government, or we are supporting the government in that effort.
And perhaps finally, I heard an alarming statistic on Friday that a third of the displaced people in the world are on the continent. What gives you hope in the face of all of this?
People. I think despite so there's 123 million people displaced, and you refer to budgetary circumstances. Our organization, and with us all our partners, have to do it with these days with an amount of funding the same as 10 years ago. But in the meantime, the number of people displaced has doubled. So yes, it's difficult to be positive, but if you look at the broader context, if you look at the individual level, there are still so many people, and especially I've seen this here. I've been in other contexts before. I've seen this here in South Africa. The intention to do the right thing is still so much there at the individual level, at the community level, at the government level. There are still so many people, contrary to what sometimes is the global narrative, willing to do the right thing.
That's fantastic
that's
to
very
hear.
helpful.
Jan, we're going to have to leave it there. Always good talking to you. Thanks so much indeed.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a good day.
Thank you. That's Jan de Bishop, who's External Relations Officer at the UNHCR's South Africa Multi-Country Office, talking to us about World Refugee Day. It is 7 o'clock Central African time. Asanda, Beda.
And thank you so much for staying with us. If you've just joined us, thank you for doing that. And we're coming to you from our studios live in Johannesburg, South Africa. This is, of course, Rise and Shine on Channel Africa. If you're live streaming, you can find us via our different platforms on social media. At Channel Africa 1 is our handle across those platforms. Let's take a moment to thank the team as well. You hear Peter and Asanda on the air, but that's not all there is to Rise and Shine. So thanks to our production team, Tlengiwe Mabaso, Joey Luhodi and Pumuzo Ramagadza. On technical production, Francis Masina. On social media, Nomalanga Butelezi. On news, Jwalane Tulo Mwepe. Economics news, Tabiso Lehuku. And our sports news by Fikile Lingwati.
All right, all of that still to come. In fact, we've got a lot coming up. ECOWAS, sickle cell in Africa, just some of the issues, and also rhinos translocation. We'll give you more details on that after the news with Jwalane Tulo Mwepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. The South African government says it has noted with a great deal of anxiety the entry by the US into the Israel-Iran war. President Cyril Ramaphosa has called on all involved in the conflict to pursue efforts of dialogue to end the war. This follows Trump's statement that the US has completed a successful attack on 3 nuclear sites in Iran yesterday morning. Presidential spokesperson Vincent Magwenya says Pretoria will support peace talk initiatives.
It was South Africa's sincerest hope that President Donald Trump will use his influence and that of the U.S. government to prevail on the parties to pursue a dialogue path in resolving their issues of dispute. South Africa calls on the United States, Israel and Iran to give the United Nations the opportunity and space to lead on the peaceful resolution of matters of dispute, including the inspection and verification of Iran's status of uranium enrichment, as well as its broader nuclear capacity.
The family of Zambia's late former President Edgar Lungu is expected to announce the funeral arrangements this week. Lungu will be laid to rest in South Africa, becoming the first former head of state of another country to be buried in the country. Zambian President Hakainde Hichilema last week cut short a period of national mourning after Lungu's family refused to allow his body to be repatriated from South Africa as planned. Still in South Africa, the government has welcomed the release of its nationals Peter Shane Huxham and Frederick Potgieter from detention in Equatorial Guinea. Their release follows the granting of clemency by the President of Equatorial Guinea. The 2 engineers in the oil and gas industry were arrested in February 2023 and subsequently sentenced to 12 years imprisonment. They were convicted on drug-related charges with a staggering fine of $5 million each. International Relations and Corporation Minister Ronald Lamola says the government consistently appealed for clemency, highlighting the humanitarian aspects of the case and the profound impact on the families of the detained.
It's a great relief to the South African government and to the family. We therefore convey our message of gratitude to the government of Equatorial Guinea. We also want to thank the family for cooperating with us.
Officials in Algeria say 3 people have died after falling from the upper stand of a stadium just after the final whistle, as local football team MC Alger won the league title. Dozens of others were injured when a security barrier collapsed, with fans surging forward to celebrate before falling onto the lower tier of the stadium. The health ministry says more than 70 people have been treated in 3 hospitals, adding that most have since been released. Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune has offered his condolences and wished a speedy recovery for the injured. The case against a Gauteng woman believed to be part of a syndicate targeting young female professionals will resume in Johannesburg, South Africa this morning. The syndicate kidnaps the woman and robs them of their belongings. Recently, SABC News reported on 2 cases in which young women were taken out on a date by an alleged scammer. As they entered the vehicle, they found another woman who the scammer claimed was their younger sister. Monique Lewis has the story.
According to the state, the woman and male accomplice, who still at large, had stopped next to a female pedestrian and allegedly forced her into the vehicle before assaulting the victim with a taser. They took her cell phone and removed money from her bank account. In court last Tuesday, the state indicated that there were 2 similar cases reported in Alexandra and Pretoria. The SABC was refused permission to broadcast court proceedings. The state says identifying the accused would jeopardize the ongoing investigations.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Cholani Tulo Webe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, Namibia's mixed martial arts team has intensified preparations for the Mixed Martial Arts Championship in Abu Dhabi. And Carlos Alcaraz surprises fans with Wimbledon. That's a form that he has after the grass court triumph. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
The 2025 Commonwealth Trade Ministers meeting and business summit took place in Windhoek in Namibia this past week. It officially concluded on Friday. Trade ministers, diplomats and stakeholders gathered to review the outcomes and plans, the next steps for implementation. Channel Africa's Lebohang Mabange filed this report.
As the curtains came down on the Commonwealth Trade Ministers meeting, leaders left the room with a renewed sense of urgency and unity. Delegates agreed that global trade is facing rising headwinds from geopolitical tensions to systemic disruptions and that collective Commonwealth action is vital. Delivering a statement on behalf of Samoa's Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Fiame Naomi Matafa, an official reminded delegates of the call for coordinated solutions.
The Samoan Prime Minister and Chair in Office, in her opening remarks to this distinguished gathering, called for a united response, a Commonwealth response to the key challenges we face, especially on the escalating geopolitical and trade tensions and the challenges confronting the global trading system. This meeting did that with your finalized Commonwealth statement on the multilateral trading system.
But the Prime Minister's closing message was also forward-looking, a call to keep the momentum going beyond Windhoek.
But this is only the beginning of our work. Samoa issues an additional challenge for us as trade officials and ministers to own this statement and take the cordial spirit of our meeting in Namibia to continue our united response to defend the multilateral trading system. Our Honourable Chair of the CTMM, Honourable Minister, highlighted in her opening remarks some of the key deliverables from this meeting, including how we can deepen intra-Commonwealth trade and investment. This meeting did that.
Commonwealth Secretary-General Shirley Bochwe praised the level of engagement and unity showed by member states, especially in their shared commitment to inclusive trade, green growth and digital innovation.
It is clear from the urgency of our discussions over the last 2 days that you are fully seized of the enormity of the challenges that lie ahead. The actions and concrete outcomes which you have endorsed leave me with no doubt that you stand united in your commitment to tackle them. Together, we have explored new pathways for deepening intra-Commonwealth trade, enhancing investment, leveraging digital trade, accelerating the sustainable energy transition, and building resilient economies to advance growth and prosperity. especially for our small and vulnerable states.
Namibia, as host, helped steer the summit's direction. Minister of International Relations and Trade Selma Ashipala Musavi outlined the key thematic areas agreed upon, especially those with the potential to unlock inclusive development.
We have discussed and took note of a number of areas of work, including reflecting on the outcomes of the senior trade officials meetings and on our future work, exploring opportunities to deepen intra-Commonwealth trade and investment, particularly in areas of shared comparative advantage, such as sustainable agriculture, digital services, renewable energy, and critical minerals.
As delegates prepare to return to their home countries, what happens next will define the legacy of the Windhoek Summit. Implementation, inclusivity, and innovation remain the Commonwealth's guiding pillars as it stays the course towards its $2 trillion trade target. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Windhoek, Namibia.
Sierra Leone's President Julius Maada Bio has been named the new chairman of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, succeeding Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu after 2 years at the helm. The announcement came during the ECOWAS summit in Abuja on Sunday, where regional leaders gathered to assess the bloc's progress and set new priorities. President Bio has pledged to focus on restoring constitutional order, strengthening democracy, revitalizing regional security, boosting economic integration, and enhancing institutional credibility. For more on the summit's outcomes and their implications for West Africa, we speak with political analyst Austin Aigbe, a member of the West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network, who joins us from Abuja this morning. Austin, a very good morning to you. Thanks for making time for us on this Monday. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well. And you? And good morning to everyone there.
Thanks for your time. What are the biggest challenges that you see President Bio as what he could face in terms of the new ECOWAS, him being the new ECOWAS chairman, especially looking with the backdrop of the prevailing regional turmoil?
Yeah, thank you again. Even though I'm delighted a bit that President Maada Bio did expressly state that he was going to restore constitutional order in the region. How he's going to do that is only time will tell. But it's important to state that one of the crises facing the region is not what arguably the immediate past chair, the President of Nigeria, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, had highlighted in his welcome remark at that summit. Tinubu has tried to technically avoided the main challenge, which is constitutional order, which is peace and security, which is democracy. You cannot have economic integration without peace and security. You cannot have youth empowerment and all of the youth inclusion, all of the infrastructural development, all of the advancement in technology, and all of those he mentioned if the crisis is faced with enhancing security challenges, particularly in the Sahel region. It is going to be an uphill task because the immediate chair had avoided to speak to that. And that was why it was important, like I said, that President Maada Bio, the president of Sierra Leone, who just took over, had tried to face that directly, that the restoration of constitutional order was key. And I like to state that that is actually a very key dimension that Maada Bio will need to face. For instance, he needs to be able to restore constitutional order in Guinea-Bissau. Umbalo Sisi was in that meeting yesterday. He needs to be able to restore constitutional order in Côte d'Ivoire. Alassane did not participate in that meeting yesterday because he's facing an election for a fourth term in office. He needs to also try to restore, if possible, as at this time, the constitution has already been implemented in Togo. Togo now has a permanent president and a ceremonial head of state who attended the meeting yesterday. And if you go beyond that, is the crisis of the exit of these three Sahel states, it needs to be able to restore constitutional order in the three Sahel states. As it is today, ECOWAS has diminished from 15 to 12, which is not a very good one under the president of Nigeria at that time. But in any case, President Madabio, who also was a military head of state many years ago and became a democratically elected president and ran for election in 2023, for a rerun election in 2023, who is due to maybe also end his regime by June of 2025. Hopefully, his experience as a military head and his experience now as a Democrat may be brought to fore in an attempt to restore constitutional order. I think that's very important. Peace and security is what ECOWAS need at this time. Advancement in democracy. Of course, people argue that democracy is not a silver lining bullet. However, it is still better off when you compare that with military regime.
So certainly his priorities are set. You've clarified a number of them, and a long list there is of them as well. But how can President Bayo strengthen or deal with the issue of political stability, political instability and coups in West Africa? You speak about his military background. Would that step in here and help in terms of his modus operandi? How does he deal with these issues?
Fantastic. You see, Amapia did talk about his military background. He was a very strong leader in that country, retired as he left the military as a brigadier general, and he has been able to stabilize. Whether to his credit, I don't know. In 2023, there was a military coup, an attempted coup in Sierra Leone. They literally killed many military officers, an attempt to take over the weaponry of that country. And ECOWAS intervened. ECOWAS had to quickly run to Sierra Leone and try to prevail and then stabilize that country. And since 2023 November, there hadn't been any attempted military invasion, even though the 2023 election of that country also provided some form of nostalgia, I may say, because the opposition political party did not make any attempt to participate in the process of governance in that country. The APC of that country refused to join the parliament. They declined participation. But somehow, with the help of regional mission, including the AU and of course ECOWAS, the mediation process ended up in what is now called a peaceful country, so to say. I'm hoping, just before I said I'm hoping, is that those recommendations from that peace architecture is being implemented, including almost a 70-point electoral reform proposal, which the president has set up a committee to try to see how to implement those electoral reforms. If he's doing that genuinely, he may know the challenge that is also dominant in other countries, that he was faced with this huge challenge in country with almost a flawed election, and eventually, based on mediation, they were able to come out. Right now, the APC of that country is now participating. The All People's Party is not participating in the election. I mean, in the governance process. They went to the parliament, and now the peace in that country has a bit been restored. The country is to be faced with almost like a terrorist kind of uprising, with a guy called Adebayo, who lives somewhere in Netherlands, who used to instill some violence in the country. But today, in the past a year or two, that has literally dropped. How he did that, maybe it could be that to fall in the region. We know what happened to the Sahel states and why they literally backed out. We know the story. He was part, and is still part of the authority of head of state that made that decision for ECOWAS to invade Niger. And of course, that was the snowball that led to the Sahelian state and eventually what we see now.
Yeah, so touching on the matters of history, from the former head of ECOWAS, President Tinubu's legacy and achievements, what could President Bayo draw as inspiration and a way of continuing those achievements and the legacy?
arguably, I will not throw away all the things that Bola Ahmed Tinubu did. It was mean. He has said that if you look at his opening his remark, everything he wished to see in ECOWAS, we outlined. But even though he didn't quite say that he did XYZ, he only said in Nigeria, the youth are being empowered infrastructure-wise, civic tech and all of that. But beyond that is that Madabio need to draw lesson from a conflict management theory. At least before you confront, you should have consulted, you should have consolidated on consultation before making any attempt to confront. Confrontation at this case, at this time in ECOWAS region is not an option. What needed to be done is peace building in a way that Bonabio still has a few weeks, I say a few weeks, by July the 29th, the Sahelian state would have officially exited based on a 6 months waiver that timeline that ECOWAS had given to the Sahel state. So he had about a few weeks to see if the mediation can. Already mediation is happening. We know that President Mahama has been doing his bit. We also know that ECOWAS has mandated Faye, President of Senegal, and of course Togo President at that time to intervene. Those mediation, Madabio needed to take them over and see how he could personally lead the mediation process.
All right.
As chair of ECOWAS,
we're going to have to. Awesome. We're going to have to leave it there, Austin, and we appreciate your time again. We are out of time.
Thank you very much.
Austin Aigbe is political analyst and member of the West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network, joining us from Abuja in Nigeria to discuss the new head of, or the new chairman of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, and the direction that he should be going in terms of his position. The president of Sierra Leone, Julius Maada Bio.
50 anos atrás, Moçambique ergueu-se. Do peso da guerra e dos sussurros de liberdade. Ao grito da independência, não foi fácil. A luta foi longa. O custo elevado, mas o espírito inquebrável. Hoje, Moçambique celebra 50 anos de liberdade. Do Rovuma ao Maputo, do Zimbo ao Índico, das margens às aldeias. Isto é mais do que um aniversário. É uma lembrança. Num dia 25 de junho, junta-te a nós para honrar o passado e brindar o futuro. Moçambique @50. A jornada, a alegria, o legado, numa perspectiva africana.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
Sickle cell disease remains one of the most pressing yet under-addressed public health challenges in Africa, despite being entirely preventable and manageable. Now, the World Health Organization estimates that up to 90% of global sickle cell deaths occur on the continent, many among children under the age of 5. And whilst there's growing awareness, many African countries still lack the policies, screening programs, and affordable treatment needed to tackle this inherited blood disorder effectively. Now, to explore what's being done to change that, we're now joined from Congo-Brazzaville by Dr. Kofi Nyako, who's the team leader for non-communicable diseases at the WHO Africa Regional Office. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
Let's start with explaining what sickle cell disease is. It sounds as if it is hereditary.
Yes, thank you. Yes, sickle cell disease is hereditary, and it's usually caused by a genetic defect in the red blood cells, in simple terms, where people with sickle cell disease have red blood cells which has a particular shape called a sickle shape, and therefore it impedes the flow of red blood cells through the vessels, and when it does that, it reduces the oxygen flow to the vital organs and tissues, and causing severe pain, which is called crisis, pain crisis. And this also has several complications in the body. And if not managed, especially, they tend to die before the age of 5 years. And this is very prevalent in Africa, as it is linked with the gene, people in the Africa and the Caribbean. So people of African descent are mostly affected. So in simple terms, that is sickle cell. Yeah.
So it is preventable and manageable, I understand. Why aren't we preventing and managing?
Okay, so it's preventable first and foremost. Since it's a genetic disease, people need premarital counseling, or called genetic counseling, so that when you carry the traits, you will not give it to your unborn child. If the man has the traits and the woman has the traits and they have a child and both traits come together, then you get what we call a sickler. But it's very prevalent. Most people, about 30 to 40% of people of African descent, especially within Western Africa, East Africa, and other parts of Africa, have these traits, but it doesn't mean they are sickless. But when people with these traits come together, that's when they give birth to a sickler. So always before you marry and you have African descent, you need to have this test, and mostly it's done, especially in churches, premarital counseling, so that when you carry the trait and your partner has the trait, you are advised not to marry. So that is the best preventive measure. Otherwise, when it doesn't get prevented, but you have a child with this disease, it's also manageable. And however, in Africa, because of myths and misconceptions and low levels of awareness, people are not aware that they have the disease, and they go into crisis, they get complications, and most of them die before the age of 5. It's just because in Africa, what we call early infant diagnosis or newborn screening is not prevalent in Africa. Most of our health systems are weak, and we don't have newborn screening. That is the most important. When you have newborn screening and the parents know that the child is a sickler, they will do what we call the preventive measures, giving simple penicillin V and other medicines, and they will live normal. There are studies in few European countries where they have black populations and they do newborn screening. For example, France is compulsory for every child. Now they even do it within the whites. And the mortality is less than 2%, around just 1% or below. But in Africa, as you said, before the age of 5, we lose up to about 50 to 90% of our children. So the issue is African countries, as WHO has recommended, should have newborn screening, but there is still weak health system, low political will, and this is not done. So we want this week, as we celebrated as World Sickle Cell Day on the 19th, to increase awareness, advocacy, so that our national governments will incorporate this into our health system, so that all over Africa and beyond, all children who are born will have sickle cell screening done. You know that HIV newborn screening is done across Africa and is very successful. The same blood can be used to screen for sickle cell, which is very, very cheap. We have point of care tests, which is very, very cheap. It's in sense. So it's easy for African countries to incorporate it. So it's up to our health leaders, because WHO guidelines stipulate, and you have to ensure there's strong political will to enforce this. Thank you.
All right. Sadly, we run out of time, but perhaps a final message. I know that it was Sickle Cell Day last week, Thursday, but what message would you like to leave us with today?
The message is that we have to increase awareness, and all children born should have newborn screening by our national governments, and people walking about may have the traits and we may not know. So people should test and know whether you are a sickle cell carrier, so that you make informed choice before you give birth. When this is done, we will be able to prevent or reduce sickle cell significantly in our continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much indeed. And that's where we'll leave it. Thanks so much indeed for your time and this very, very important information.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's Dr. Kofi Nyako, who's a team leader for non-communicable diseases at the World Health Organization's Africa office, regional office, which is based in Congo, Brazzaville, talking to us about sickle cell disease. Last week, Thursday, was Sickle Cell Day, and it is sad. 90% of global sickle cell deaths occur in Africa. And this is something that is preventable and manageable. And sadly, we're failing our children because of weak health systems, poor policies, and not educating our people. It's 7:30, which means it's time for your news headlines, as we say good morning once again to Jwalane Tulongwepe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Making headlines, the South African government says it has noted with great deal of anxiety the entry by the US into the Israel-Iran war. President Cyril Ramaphosa has called on all involved in the conflict to pursue efforts of dialogue to end the war. Zambian President Hakainde Hichilema has reiterated the government's desire for the late former President Edgar Lungu to be buried in Zambia, despite an ongoing dispute over funeral arrangements. And finally, officials in Algeria say 3 people have died after falling from the upper stand of a stadium just after the final whistle as local football team MC Alger won the league title. I will have details on these and other stories at 8 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective. Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
Let's check in with the world of sports as we say good morning to Fikile Lingwati for the latest update.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good morning, Asanda. We begin with martial arts. Namibia's mixed martial arts MMA team has intensified preparations as they gear up for the International Mixed Martial Arts Federation. That's a Youth World Championships in Abu Dhabi from the 21st to the 27th of July. This year's event is said to be the biggest youth amateur MMA event in history, welcoming young athletes from around the globe to compete for the prestige IWMAF Gold. According to the coach, the fighters are currently undergoing rigorous training sessions aimed at sharpening their skills and improving fitness levels ahead of the highly anticipated global competition. De Souza says preparations are progressing well, but admitted the training routine has been demanding on the athletes. On to football news, the Real Madrid shrugged off an early red card to defeat Mexico's Pachuca 3-1 and take a big step towards the knockout stage of the Club World Cup on Sunday. The result leaves Madrid under new coach Xavi Alonso on top of Group H with 4 points, while Pachuca are eliminated after 2 defeats. Saudi club Al Hilal, who held Real in the opener, faced second place Salzburg later. The Spanish giants were in trouble after just 7 minutes when Raul Asensio was shown a straight red card after he pulled down Salomon Rondon with a Venezuelan clear on goal. That left the League MX team sensing the chance for an upset in front of 70,000 fans at the home of the NFL's Carolina Panthers. Now, the cricket news, Hayley Matthews produced a captain's innings to guide the West Indies to a 6-wicket victory over the Proteas women in a low-scoring second T20 international at the 3Ws Oval in Barbados, levelling the 3-match series at 1-1. In the response to South Africa's total of 113 for 6 from their allotted 20 overs, Matthews anchored the Windies' chase with an unbeaten 63 of 54 balls, including 5 fours and 6. Proteas coach Mandla Mashimbi says they are disappointed.
Disappointing that we lost the game, and I think we just didn't score enough runs. We didn't adapt well to the conditions. We came with a lot of confidence based on how we played the last game, but I think the conditions played a big role. We just didn't adapt well enough. to make sure that we get ourselves into a score that's going to be competitive. However, you know, the bowlers, the way they went about their business and to take it to the last over, that's a big positive for us.
Let's end with golf news. The U.S. Ryder Cup captain Keegan Bradley won the Travelers' Championship for the second time in 3 seasons. A dramatic last-hole birdie denying England's Tommy Fleetwood his first PGA victory. Bradley, trailing Fleetwood by 1 at the 18th tee, dropped his approach to 6 feet while Fleetwood was short of his green, left himself a par putt from just inside 7 feet, then missed it to the right. Bradley then sank his tension-packed birdie putt for the title. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fidel Ngwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
It's time for another look at what's been happening in the world of business, commerce and industry. And at the business desk this morning is Tabiso Lihuko. Good morning.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Peter, and good morning. The ongoing conflict between Israel and Iran risks pushing up fuel prices if it intensifies. South Africa's Minerals and Petroleum Resources Minister Gwede Mantashe says if the war intensifies, it could be difficult to move oil, leading to higher prices. Israel and Iran have been exchanging strikes for about a week now, leading to devastation and adding to global economic uncertainty. Mantashe comments.
There's a body called OPEC. OPEC is a collection of all producing countries in the world, and that is where we get our oil. But the reality of the matter is that if that conflict intensifies, it's going to push the price of petrol up, and people must expect that it will push the price of petrol up because moving oil is going to be much more difficult and more complex than it was earlier.
The Lunga Human Rights Foundation has lambasted South Africa's banks for selling properties at a fraction of their market worth to recoup costs from defaulting home loan holders. The foundation has accused the banks of initiating legal action for repossession even when homeowners are actively reducing their areas. They say by imposing excessive legal costs on homeowners, the legal fees end up surpassing the actual home loan debt. The foundation is part of a group leading the $3.4 billion class action against the major banks in the country. Its president, Nkululeko Elithole, says the banks are failing to engage meaningfully with the customers before resorting to court action.
It's terrible when people are being repossessed of their houses. We're dealing with thousands and thousands of people who have lost their houses through auction. And before 2018, houses were sold at footstools. But from 2018 August, we took the banks to court, whereby the houses now must be sold at its current value.
Delegates at the 2025 Commonwealth Trade Ministers Meeting and Business Summit in Windhoek, Namibia, have agreed that global trade is facing headwinds. Trade ministers, diplomats and stakeholders had gathered to review the outcomes and the plan of the next implementation phase. The meeting officially concluded on Friday. Samoa's Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Fiami Naomi Matafa.
The Samoan Prime Minister and Chair in Office, in her opening remarks to this distinguished gathering, called for a united response, a Commonwealth response to the key challenges we face, especially on the escalating geopolitical and trade tensions and the challenges confronting the global trading system.
The Democratic Republic of Congo has extended by 3 months a ban on exports of cobalt intended to curb oversupply of the electric vehicle battery material. The world's top cobalt supplier imposed a 4-month suspension on exports in February after prices had hit a 9-year low at just $10 a pound. The ban expired on Sunday. In a statement, the Authority for the Regulation and Control of Strategic Mineral Substances Markets said the decision had been taken to extend the temporary suspension due to the continued high level of stock on the market. Energy markets have opened for the first trading session since the U.S. attack on Iran, with oil prices jumping to a 5-month high. On opening, prices rose by 3% but went down to around 2.75. The increase is not as dramatic as some analysts had feared. Oil prices were expected to spike following the attack over the weekend. The BBC's Katie Silver has the details.
What we have seen historically when it comes to oil prices is that regime change can have a huge impact. For example, JP Morgan, they've crunched the numbers and said that when we see regime change, that can lead to spikes of 76% in the oil price. The other interesting element that we've been watching as well is the Strait of Hormuz. It's a 33-kilometre passage. About a fifth of the world's oil passes through there every day. We're also hearing from analysts that if they do disrupt this, we might see oil rise between $90 and $95 a barrel, currently trading around $79. So that could have a really significant impact for many consumers.
$1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 547, Botswana 13.23, Kenya 128 shilling 568, and Zambia 23 kwacha 9. The BRICS countries in Brazil, the dollar there will cost you ₹5.51, Russia 78 rubles 39, India 86 rupees 49, China 7 yuan 18, and in South Africa the dollar will cost you 17 rand 99 cents. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Commodities markets: gold at $3,361 and platinum $1,267 per ounce. Brent crude oil is at $78.29 a barrel. For any business stories you would like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg, I'm Thabiso Lohuku.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
50 anos atrás, Moçambique ergueu-se. Do peso da guerra e dos sussurros de liberdade. Ao grito da independência, não foi fácil. A luta foi longa. O custo elevado, mas o espírito inquebrável. Hoje, Moçambique celebra 50 anos de liberdade. Do Rovuma ao Maputo, do Zimbo ao Índico, das margens às aldeias. Isto é mais do que um aniversário. É uma lembrança. Num dia 25 de junho, junta-te a nós para honrar o passado e brindar o futuro. Moçambique @50. A jornada, a alegria, o legado, numa perspectiva africana. Este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África, com Remo Samo e João Yabalá.
O surto da cólera em Angola tem causado grande preocupação, afetando já mais de metade das províncias do país. Simultaneamente, a Agência dos Estados Unidos para o Desenvolvimento Internacional, USAID, um dos maiores doadores mundiais de assistência humanitária, decidiu não priorizar os países com maior incidência de malária. Para discutirmos as causas do alastramento da cólera em Angola e os impactos dessa decisão da USAID, convidamos o Dr. Jeremias Agostinho, médico e mestre em saúde pública, para partilhar a sua visão sobre o tema.
A doença, nesse momento, representa o maior risco que nós temos. Nos últimos anos,
Esteve sempre centrado com os casos de malária, os casos de tuberculose e também de infecção por VIH-Sida. A forma como em pouco menos de 2 meses os casos de cólera vêm aumentando acaba por representar nessa altura um dos maiores desafios que o país tem. É expectável que nesta fase o número de casos venha a aumentar.
De segunda a sexta-feira, das 20 às 21 horas locais, este é o Caleidoscópio do Canal África.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
7:44 Central African Time. Let's take a look at this environmental story now. Where 10 additional critically endangered black rhino have been translocated from South Africa to Zinave National Park in Mozambique to secure the first founder population of black rhino since becoming locally extinct 5 decades ago. The rhino, 5 male and 5 female, were kindly donated by South Africa's provincial conservation entity, Ezemvelo KZN Wildlife, in collaboration with Mozambique's National Administration for Conservation Areas, or ENAC, and Peace Parks Foundation, with financial support from players of UK People's Postcode Lottery, Anthony Alexander. We are joined by Anthony Alexander. He's a Peace Parks Foundation. He's with the Peace Parks Foundation and joining us on the line. Anthony, thank you for making time for us. How are you?
Yeah, good morning to you and your listeners as well. Thank you.
Let's talk about Peace Parks Foundation first of all. Give us background in terms of the work that you do.
Well, Peace Parks Foundation was founded many years ago by many, including President Nelson Mandela, Anton Rupert, and Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands. And we supported initially the creation and establishment of trans-frontier conservation areas, such as the Great Limpopo Trans-Frontier Conservation Area. And now we've moved more into a focus of landscape management for conservation purposes and the management and development of conservation areas.
All right. So in terms of this initiative then, between the UK People's Postcode, the Peace Parks Foundation, Mozambique's National Administration for Conservation Areas, and Ezemvelo KZN Wildlife, what can you tell us?
Well, in 2001, a treaty was signed between Mozambique and South Africa and Zimbabwe to establish the Great Limpopo Trans-Frontier Conservation Area. Now, Zinave National Park in Mozambique sits within that conservation area, and we've got a 20-year co-management agreement with the Mozambique Government Conservation Authority to support the management and development of that area. Now, what is critical for your viewers is many will think taking rhinos to Mozambique is risky, but this ensures the management of that risk through the technical and financial support we give to that conservation area. We've 10 years into that agreement so far, and we've had no serious poaching threats to that environment. We've also been very involved with Ezemvelo KZN Wildlife over many years, supporting, amongst other things, the technology side of the protection of the rhino. And Ezemvelo KZN Wildlife has very generously donated these 10 rhino, and there's an agreement that backs it up with the Mozambique government on how those rhino will be managed and protected. So, as you can understand, there's many levels, from high-level government level to on-the-ground implementation level, and of course the funding from the People's Postcode Lottery that's involved in this fantastic operation.
So what about the Zinave National Park in Mozambique make it an ideal home for this population of black rhino? You mentioned that in the 10 years you haven't seen any poaching incidents.
No notable poaching incidents. We first re-established the park's 50 years old for a start. So, with the signing of this co-management agreement, we could start some serious management and development of the park. So, you started with re-establishing the management systems and management structures, the infrastructures and the roads. A sanctuary area was created, now 30,000 hectares, in which you can more effectively protect and manage your landscape. And that took a number of years to establish. And then we started a rewilding program. We've rewilded over 2,500 game from South Africa and Swaziland and from within Mozambique into the area now. Mm-hmm. Lions have moved themselves from within the GLTFCA into the park as a demonstration of the effectiveness of the GLTFCA. And now with the re-establishment of rhino back into the landscape, it's now the first Big Five in many decades, in a Big Five national park in many decades in the country. Why black rhino, and we've also got white rhino there now, is that when we start to look at a park, we look at all the historical records of what species used to be there, and both black and white rhino used to be there. So through advice of ecologists and various scientists, we've re-established them in the landscape. We had currently 12 black rhino relocated 2 years ago. They subsequently had birth of 2 rhinos, so the population is up to 14. Now, scientifically, it's shown that a population of anywhere above 16, 17, 18, as you increase your population size, you increase your viability, both from a genetic strength and from an ability to increase in numbers. So with the additional 10 rhinos, we now get above that critical tipping point of it now becoming a viable population. And so now with 12 plus 2 and a further 10, we've now got 24 in the landscape. And we hope with further protection, we can now obviously increase that number and potentially enable moving rhinos within Mozambique to other protected areas sometime in the future.
All right, so it's 5 male, 5 females now being translocated this time around. You mentioned 2 years ago it was 12. But what is the overall tally of black rhino that have been translocated from specifically South Africa to, or have they gone all to Mozambique? Let's say maybe in the past 5-10 years.
Yeah, so we started the rhino translocation phase 3 years ago. From a black rhino perspective, we've translocated 12 and had 2 babies as a result of that. So we're now up to 24. And then we've also translocated so far 27 white rhino and have had 7 births already. And we've got plans to translocate another 9 this year. So at the end of this year, we will have, 24 black rhino and 39 white rhinos, which is a notable population size for Mozambique.
All right, and my next question you've just answered there, because I was going to ask if we expect more to be taken. So 9 more by the end of this year.
Yeah, for this year, and then we'll see how we go. We've obviously got a lot of landscape available for further rhino. And we could re-establish more rhino to Zanav, and we're also looking at other potential conservation areas. So within Mozambique, we co-manage 4 parks. In the Great Limpopo Transfrontier Conservation Area, we've got Limpopo, Benin, and Zanav. And that overall area is 100,000 square kilometers, so a massive landscape. And then we're also co-managing a beautiful park called Maputo National Park, which is about 1 hour's drive from Maputo. And we're also potentially looking at the relocation of rhino there in the future. It's already at a stage, that park is at a ready stage of tour development, and I encourage any listener to have a look at it on the website, Maputo National Park, because it is a fantastic bush and beach destination. And our project there has gone on for so long now that we're even looking at relocating game from that park to Benin National Park later this year. Because the historical game relocations and the protection thereafter have been so successful.
So in terms of the translocation of these rhino, how does it benefit the ecosystem?
So black rhino are firstly critically endangered, so they're of high value to the conservation world. They are generally browsers, and they like a bush, a scrub and a bush type landscape. And they eat many species of scrub and bush that other animals would not eat. In the winter, they'll generally try a more leafy vegetation. In the summer, the more woody vegetation. And by eating those scrubs and bush, they tend to open up the landscape a bit more, and that enables a better environment for grass to flourish. And of course, most plains game are grass eaters, so it just helps balance the ecosystem and make sure certain species don't dominate the landscape.
Any concerns of overgrazing there in Mozambique, and what contingency plans are in place? Of course, this would be secondary to making sure that these animals don't or get removed from the extinction list.
So we've got a 30,000 hectare sanctuary. It's fenced, electrically fenced, and we get some ecologists to come in every year to come and assess the landscape. We have been hit by some quite severe droughts the last 2 years, but in the case of black rhino, that won't impact black rhino because they are, as I mentioned, they're browsers, and droughts generally don't impact browsers. So, and black rhinos also tend to eat its own very unique type of vegetation that you won't get other black rhino to eat. Sorry, other species to eat.
Right. What can you explain to us in terms of the reproductive cycle of black rhino, and if that in any way can help remove this animal from the extinction list?
So a black rhino would generally live to about 35 to 50 years of age. So they do have a very long lifespan from an animal kingdom perspective. Their gestation period is around about 15 months. And generally the calf will be weaned off in about 2 years. So you're looking at probably at 15 months plus 2 years. So you're looking at about 3.5 to 4 years. I would expect that you would potentially have a calf to be produced. And then they reach maturity at around 6 years. So as mentioned before, we've had was it 12 rhino relocated, black rhino relocated, and 2 have given birth. So that's quite a nice record to work off. And I think very critically for us is that of the 10 rhino coming, 5 are female. So we do expect a good potential growth rate, but it is a species that, as I said, they'll only generally have a calf every 4 or 5 years. But that's just some information in that area.
Right, very interesting facts there. The black rhino as well is not is also found in countries such as Botswana. If we focus in the southern part of the continent, Lesotho as well, Zimbabwe and Namibia. So how are they doing in those countries, and could there be a need to relocate them or translocate them to Mozambique as well?
So this relocation program is part of the Black Rhino Range Expansion Program, and of which Ndoro KZN Wildlife is a major player, given their strong history of rhino repopulation. And the intent of that Black Rhino Range Expansion Program is to repopulate rhino across the landscape. One of the very exciting things happening in conservation these days is that an increase of NGO support towards the co-management and development of parks. As you know, conservation is not always the highest priority from a government perspective, and so the bringing in of these NGOs and providing better financial and technical management of parks is now creating a better enabling environment in Southern Africa, and leveraging off that stronger capacity and external support towards governments. There's now an environment to increase the range of populations. I believe they've relocated probably around well over 200 black rhino over this time period. I can't comment specifically on how successful and the status of other areas, other than to say that it is linked to a specific program which is well managed, and that it is based on quite a strong selection criteria of ensuring that those protected areas are well managed long into the future. So, for example, in the case of Zanav, we've got a 20-year co-management agreement, which is obviously renewable, and that ensures a stable environment for the population numbers to increase.
Any other partnerships South Africa has entered into, or the KZN Wildlife, the Ezemvelo KZN Wildlife Fund?
I think I've covered most of it. I think the big thing to understand is for the viewers and listeners to understand is that at a big government level between Mozambique, South Africa and Zimbabwe, there's a treaty, and that treaty outlines the principles of how one will manage the great conservation landscape. And then obviously at a more on the ground level specific to this operation, there's an agreement between Ezemvelo KZN Wildlife that outlines how the population will be managed and reported on, so that KZN Wildlife can also obviously do due diligence and ensure that their investment into Mozambique landscape is well managed.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Anthony. We appreciate it. Continue doing the great work at Peace Parks Foundation.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thanks. That's Anthony Alexander with the Peace Parks Foundation talking to us about that partnership between Ezemvelo KZN Wildlife, Mozambique's National Administration for Conservation Areas, their foundation, the Peace Parks Foundation, as well as the UK People's Postcode Lottery to translocate those 10 rhino from South Africa to Mozambique to make sure that they, as a population, grow but also thrive in the ideal environment there. Well, it's just a bit like, a minute to go before we get to the top of the hour. Of course, on this 23rd of June, if it is your birthday, we wish you a very blessed birthday, and you share your birthday with a few famous people. A lot of sports stars were born on this day. Clive Barker, South African soccer coach, born in Durban in 1944. You share a birthday with him. Philbert Bayi, Tanzanian athlete who achieved a world record in the 1,500 meters in 1974, also Olympic silver medalist back in 1980. He was born in Karatu in Tanzania in 1953. Also a Zimbabwean cricket batsman and captain, born in Bulawayo in 1957, is David Houghton. And Zinedine Zidane, French soccer midfielder, then he became a Real Madrid manager. He was born in 1972. So those are the famous people you share your birthday with on this 23rd of June.
So it's 8 o'clock Central African time, and looking ahead to what's happening in this hour, the Middle East. That's in flames at the moment. Israel versus Iran, but the United States has entered the fray. And we'll be unpacking that with somebody who who really understands the region. Naeem Gina will be explaining what it all means to us. And one of the consequences probably is that we're going to probably pay more for petrol at the pumps, Asanda.
Yeah, that's what we can't avoid about that one, unfortunately. Let's get our news update in this third and final hour of Africa Rise and Shine. Here's Jalane Tulongwepe with the full update of news, and then Fikile Lingwati just with sports headlines for now.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. The South African government says it has noted with a great deal of anxiety the entry by the US into the Israel-Iran war. President Cyril Ramaphosa has called on all involved in the conflict to pursue efforts of dialogue to end the war. This follows Trump's statement that the US has completed a successful attack on 3 nuclear sites in Iran yesterday morning. Presidential spokesperson Vincent Magwenya says Pretoria will support peace talk initiatives.
It was South Africa's sincerest hope that President Donald Trump will use his influence and that of the US government to prevail on the parties to pursue a dialogue path in resolving their issues of dispute. South Africa calls on the United States, Israel and Iran to give the United Nations the opportunity and space to lead on the peaceful resolution of matters of dispute, including the inspection and verification of Iran's status of uranium enrichment, as well as its broader nuclear capacity.
Meanwhile, leader of the Economic Freedom Fighters in South Africa, Julius Malema, says his party firmly supports Iran, who he says has the right to defend itself against what he says was Western imperialism. His comments come amidst the US attacks on Iran's main nuclear sites over the weekend. Malema also reiterated support for Palestine and said the struggle of the young people in South Africa is global and that the pain of the children in South Africa is connected to the pain of the children in Palestine, where bombs are dropped on homes and schools.
We stand in full solidarity with Iran, a country under siege from Western imperialism for choosing independence. We reject the bullying of this nation by the United States, Israel and its allies. And we stand by their right to defend themselves by any means necessary. Let Israel finally have a taste of the devastation and violence it has perpetrated in Gaza.
Zambian President Hakainde Hichilema has reiterated the government's desire for the late former President Edgar Lungu to be buried in Zambia despite an ongoing dispute over funeral arrangements. The family of Lungu is expected to make an announcement on the arrangements this week. Lungu will be laid to rest in South Africa, becoming the first former head of state of another country to be buried in the country. Hichilema also cut a short period of mourning, of national mourning last week after Lungu's family refused to allow his body to be repatriated from South Africa as planned. He made the remarks during a high-level meeting in Lusaka with a delegation from South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, led by Minister of International Relations and Cooperation Ronald Lamola.
Our wish has been very clear
that we would like the mortal remains of President Lungu, our sixth president, to be buried in his home country, Zambia, and not in any other country. And I think these are the issues amongst many we've discussed, and we're grateful to President Ramaphosa for his graciousness and his government, the people of South Africa. We continue seeking a solution, a civilized solution, I must say.
Officials in Algeria say 3 people have died after falling from the upper stand of a stadium just after the final whistle as local football team MC Alger won the league title. Dozens of others were injured when a security barrier collapsed, with fans surging forward to celebrate before falling onto the lower tier of the stadium. The health ministry says more than 70 people have been treated in 3 hospitals, adding that most have since been released. Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune has offered his condolences and wished a speedy recovery to the injured. The case against a Gauteng woman believed to be part of a syndicate targeting young female professionals will resume in Johannesburg, South Africa this morning. The syndicate kidnaps the woman and robs them of their belongings. Recently, SABC News reported on 2 cases in which young women were taken out on a date by an alleged scammer. As they entered the vehicle, they found another woman who the scammer claims was their younger sister. Monique Lewis has the story.
According to the state, the woman and male accomplice, who still at large, had stopped next to a female pedestrian and allegedly forced her into the vehicle before assaulting the victim with a taser. They took her cell phone and removed money from her bank account. In court last Tuesday, the state indicated that there were 2 similar cases reported in Alexandra and Pretoria. The SABC was refused permission to broadcast court proceedings. The state says identifying the accused would jeopardize the ongoing investigations.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Cholani Tulo Webe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, the Springbok Sevens claimed the Rugby Africa Sevens Cup in Port Louis, and Namibia's mixed martial arts team has intensified preparations for the Mixed Martial Arts Championship in Abu Dhabi. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
The ongoing conflict between Israel and Iran risks pushing up fuel prices if it intensifies. South Africa's Minerals and Petroleum Resources Minister, Beda says if the war intensifies, it could be difficult to move oil, leading to higher prices. Israel and Iran have been exchanging strikes for about a week, leading to devastation and adding to global economic uncertainty. Gloria Sifago Musi has more.
South Africa's sources of oil are diverse, but what happens to oil prices will affect the local economy. Oil prices touched $78 per barrel this week, with rising tensions in the Middle East continuing to fuel fears of regional supply disruptions as Israel and Iran continue to attack each other. Experts say the biggest risk associated with this conflict is if Iran decided to close the Strait of Hormuz, which would disrupt supply and lead to sharp price increases. Minerals and Petroleum Resources Minister Beda says if this conflict escalates, this could push up the petrol price.
There's a body called OPEC. OPEC is a collection of all producing countries in the world, and that is where we get our oil. But the reality of the matter is that if that conflict intensified, it's going to push the price of petrol up. And people must expect that it will push the price of petrol up because moving oil is going to be much more difficult and more complex than it was earlier. But I think that war will have to end quicker than later so that the world can be normal. Everybody defaults into talking about Third World War. I don't think prospects of a Third World War are in the immediate. It's not going to happen. People must value life. and save life wherever is possible. There must be peace in the world. Wars don't create prosperity.
Chief economist at Momentum Investments, Sanisha Pakrisamy, says ongoing tensions could fuel inflation. This would restrict the Reserve Bank from further cutting rates.
If, of course, the oil price is sustained at these levels together with the rand-dollar price, then we could potentially see what the Central Energy Fund is pricing in, roughly speaking, about an 18 cents under recovery, which would then be the fuel price increase for the month of July. And that would then, of course, come through for the consumer. But I would say that, our entry point is quite low. The base there is quite low on petrol prices. So that does provide us a little bit of a buffer, unless, of course, we do see those oil prices shooting up on the back of an escalation rather than a de-escalation of conflict between Israel and Iran.
Pakrisamy says a prolonged conflict or a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz could drive oil prices significantly higher, threatening global economic stability. Gloria Safakomusi, SABC News, Johannesburg.
To themselves.
Now, we continue with this particular story and this theme. Tensions in the Middle East have reached a perilous point, with the United States now directly involved in the escalating conflict between Iran and Israel. U.S. airstrikes have targeted Iranian nuclear facilities, prompting Tehran to vow retaliation and triggering sharp international criticism, including from South Africa. Iran's ambassador to the UN has labelled the strikes as blatant aggression, whilst President Donald Trump has spoken openly about regime change in Iran. Israel, meanwhile, continues its military campaign against high-profile targets in Tehran. With fears growing of a broader regional war and its global repercussions, we're now joined by Naeem Jina, who's a senior researcher at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection, MISTRA, to unpack the implications of this fast-moving crisis. Naeem, always good to talk to you. Thanks so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, Peter.
So you've described the trajectory of this conflict as extremely dangerous. What, in your view, makes this moment different from past escalations between Israel and Iran?
Well, in the past, it's been mostly kind of rhetoric. What we now have is actually we're on the cusp of a fully blown war between Israel and Iran. Starting with, of course, just about a week and a half ago, the illegal attacks, really, by Israel on Iran. They claim they were preemptive strikes and danger from Iran to Israel. And preemptive strikes are not protected under international law. It's a violation of international law. But what makes this moment even worse now is the involvement of the United States. The global superpower that could actually have played a role in terms of de-escalating has now escalated it further with the strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. And then this morning, Donald Trump tweeting supporting regime change in Iran. The result of that, if Iran hasn't yet retaliated against the American strikes, they're thinking about what to do. But when you bring in a regime change objective into it, Iran's retaliation could see, in a sense, the whole region going up in flames. Iran has threatened the Straits of Hormuz, as your report said. They said that they could attack American bases in the region. In neighboring countries, there's 19 American bases with tens of thousands of American soldiers who could be attacked, and that could be very serious. I don't think we've been previously in decades at this point.
So a couple of questions come to mind. You've mentioned regime change. Both Israel and the US are talking about limiting and destroying Iran's nuclear capability. What do you think is really going on? What's the real motive for Israel and the US?
I think in some ways the motives are different between the two. So for Israel, what Netanyahu and his government want actually to do is they want to completely weaken Iran to the point that Iran becomes a vassal state with no capabilities, not only no military capabilities or nuclear capabilities, but a weak state. I mean, Netanyahu had said previously, referred to the so-called Libyan option. We know what Libya looks like now. It's a state. That's what they want to see happening in Iran. So I don't think the Israelis really care what regime is in power, but the state itself must be completely destroyed. Now, unfortunately for the Israelis, Iran is not Libya and it's not Iraq. The U.S., I think the objectives of Trump, I say Trump because he seems to be making all the decisions on behalf of the government, and his objectives are a bit confused. I mean, for one thing, he wants to win the Nobel Peace Prize, and he thinks that making a deal with Iran would get him that. Well, he's now bombed Iran and is now threatening regime change. But he wants to be seen as the master of the deal. He wants to make a deal with Iran that would suit him, but at the same time, he wants the Republican Party and his electoral base together, and that base is split. We have within the Republican Party now a group that is the kind of traditional neoconservatives who see the U.S. as the policeman of the world, go everywhere with military adventures to keep people in line and bring democracy to the world, as they would say, and to support Israel 100% unquestioned. The other part of that base of Trump is the so-called MAGA faction, which is very much more America first. They don't believe that the U.S. should be getting involved in wars outside of the United States, that they should be focusing internally rather than externally. And they also don't believe that the U.S. should unquestioningly support Israel. And we've seen that, for example, those clips of Tucker Carlson's interview and others in the White House. So Trump is keen to keep these two factions together, and that's partly why we also hear kind of contradictory statements from him. One day he says no regime change, and literally within hours he calls for regime change. So it's uncertain about where Trump wants to go, and that, I think, makes the whole situation even more dangerous.
I'm trying to gauge international reaction to this. South Africa, very clear about its position. The other superpowers, big nations, seem to be struggling with how to deal with this particular crisis, especially now that the US is involved. What's your take on the international response?
So I think that the way we're seeing things falling, in broad terms, not absolutely, but in broad terms, there's a global South response and a global North response. The global North is uniting behind Israel and the United States. So we found, for example, that immediately after Israel launched its attacks on Iran, as I say, illegal under international. Before Iran even responded, the German Foreign Office issued a statement saying that Iran has a right to defend it, Israel has a right to defend itself, and that they condemn Iran's attack on Israel, when it was actually the other way around. The French president issued a similar statement thereafter. The UK issued similar statements thereafter. Now, with the American attack, we think kind of thing. These European powers, Germany, France, the UK, and others, lining up behind the US, even though the attack was illegal. Attacking nuclear facilities is banned under international law. They've lined up against them or behind the US. On the other hand, what we're seeing is that even in the region, every single country in the region, in the West Asia region, condemned Israel. even now with the American attacks. I mean, a country like Saudi Arabia, which previously we might have said was U.S., is now no longer so. They're more interested in ensuring that there's stability in the region, and they condemned America's attacks, as did Turkey and others. As you mentioned, South Africa. So we're finding that the responses are divided in this kind of way. And this is very interesting because what it says is that the global north is really not interested in international law unless it's about them. International law shouldn't apply to the global south. They're willing to throw it out the window. And that includes, of course, African states. You know, you have no more recourse as countries of the global south to international law if it's against a country in the. So this whole notion of a rules-based order, etc., after the mid-20th century, after the second big European war, all of that is thrown out the window because it's countries of the global south that seem to be flexing their muscles. And I think that this is quite scary for all of us.
There is fear about a regional war. How close are we to that?
Potentially quite close, but at the same time, you know, it could be pushed quite far. I say potentially quite close because, you know, Iran has said that if Israel stops its attack, Iran will stop. So at the moment, from the Iranian perspective, they see Israel towards them, and they believe that they are responding to those acts. It's not a full-scale war. It could become a full-scale war, and that could be disastrous in the region, but it could, to a large extent, remain between Israel and Iran. With the involvement of the United States, if Israel were to, and you know, Iran's parliament yesterday voted that the Strait of Hormuz should be. The Islamic Republic Guard Corps, the IRGC, some commanders have called for attacking American bases in response to the attack. And especially, I think, the tweets this morning will strengthen that kind of position. Iran, of course, under Article 51 of the UN Charter, has a right to defend itself. If it does that, of course, if it doesn't defend itself, Iran is saying to the world that it's a patsy, that it can be walked over, or that's how they see it, that's the message they'll be giving. And so for them, not responding to the United States is worse than responding. So what does responding mean? If they go the whole hog, then attacking American bases in the region would result in a kind of regional war. It's not going to see any closer to overthrowing the Iranian government, but you could see a regional war taking place. On the other hand, Iran's National Security Council might decide to do the kind of thing they have done previously, which is communicate to the United States that they have to respond, and the response will be at a particular American base at a particular time. You remember after the U.S. under President Trump, Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. That's what happened. The Iranians responded, but they, through the Swiss, informed the Americans that they were going to attack a particular base on a particular day. The Americans evacuated the base. The base got hit, and the Iranians said, "Okay, we're done." That's another possibility. But if the rhetoric from Trump and from the U.S. increases, and if the attacks from Israel, then that possibility becomes more and more remote.
Inside Iran, what is the sentiment now towards the leadership there? And not everybody was enamored with their leadership, but has this changed the view slightly?
Well, I don't think it's changed the view of the leadership. So those who have been dissenters or dissidents critical of the Iranian government remain so. But what it's done is it's rallied Iranians around the flag. So even, 2 days ago, there were two issues, two letters that were published by two groups of female political prisoners, as they regard themselves as Iran, saying that they're in prison because they oppose the government. They'll be in prison. But they believe that Iran's changes should come from the grassroots and not externally, and they fully condemn the Israeli actions and support Iran in its response against Israel. That has been the kind of general feeling now. So you see these protests taking place, demonstrations taking place in Iran. All kinds of people who are present there, not all of whom support the government, but they support their society. Remember, Iranians are a very patriotic nation. Their patriotism goes back thousands of years. They had an empire, the Persian Empire. Israel is less than 80 years old. And that kind of patriotism means that they support their nation, even if they don't agree with the government.
And inside Israel, Tel Aviv, Netanyahu, how is he able to continue to convince Israelis that he's doing the right thing in the region as we see Tel Aviv getting hit by missiles and Israelis losing lives?
Well, that's the thing. Remember that just before these attacks on Iran, Netanyahu was in quite a precarious position. Just 2 days before that, there was a vote in the Knesset, in the Israeli parliament, to dissolve the Knesset. If that vote had won, the parliament would have been dissolved. There would have had to be new elections, and according to polls, Netanyahu's party would not win. He, at the last minute, managed to win over, however he did that, two members of the opposition and just narrowly won that vote. But the vote was scheduled then to take place again. A good chance then that he would lose that vote and he would therefore no longer be in government. The opposition would win. He'd be dragged to court for all of his misdemeanors, corruption, etc., and have to spend some time in jail. So with the attack on Israel, we're seeing a different thing now. The Israelis, with the attack on Iran, Israelis have also rallied. And this is partly because for the past few decades, the kind of discourse in Israel has been very strong in painting Iran as an existential enemy, as being, against Western civilization, or frankly, against civilization, because only Western is civilization, and Iran as threatening the very existence of it. Until last year, Iran has never actually attacked Israel directly. Last year, the first time that Iran launched any missiles against Israel, and again, at this time, it was the Americans were informed, they informed the Israelis, they knew it was going to happen. It was after Iran attacked, after Israel attacked an Iranian consulate in Syria. No one can accept that the consulate would be. It was the first time since 1979 that Iran actually attacked Israel, right? Yet the discourse in Israel has been crafted in this way, that the only way that Israel cannot survive as long as Iran exists. And so when the attack on Iran took place a week and a half ago, that kind of psyche kicked in, and people rallied around for working towards getting rid of what they've been conditioned to believe is an existential threat to them.
And then perhaps finally, Washington, can Donald Trump continue to bypass Congress in the way that he has been for so long, pretty much since he came into office? But the stakes are just getting higher and higher now.
Yeah, that's a very good question. That's a questions should be answering through their representatives. But there seems to be a sense that the party, his own party in Congress, even though there are a number of people in that party that disagree with him, even on the attack on Iran, and frankly, that the next 3.5 years of his term could be disastrous for the Republican Party. I mean, there's a good chance they midterm elections coming up. There seems to be some kind of a hesitation or perhaps even fear in the Republican Party, and so dissenters are generally quiet and they let him have his way. So there's this debate now about whether a president can launch a war against another country without the approval of Congress. Constitutionally, it seems Congress has to approve a war. His supporters are arguing that this is not a war, etc., etc. But it seems for now, at least until the midterm elections, that he's able to get away with anything because there's some kind of a fear in the Republican Party to oppose him.
Naeem, always great getting your insights. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, Peter. Bye.
Yeah, that's Naeem Gina, Senior Researcher at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection, helping us make sense of this crisis in the Middle East, the US, Israel and Iran at the moment. And one of the things that we certainly need to be watching is the oil price likely to spike as a result of this ongoing conflict. It's 8:30. It's time for your news headlines. Here's Trelane Tulongwepe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Making headlines. The United Nations Secretary General and the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency have called for full access to Iran's nuclear facilities to account for the stockpiles of uranium that is a central issue in the ongoing war between US-backed Israel and Iran. Zambian President Hakainde Hichilema has reiterated the government's desire for the late former President Edgar Lungu to be buried in Zambia despite an ongoing dispute over funeral arrangements. And finally, the case against a Gauteng woman believed to be part of a syndicate targeting young female professionals will resume in Johannesburg, South Africa this morning. The syndicate kidnaps the woman and robs them of their belongings. I will have details on these and other stories at 9 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
It's not like...
Let's find out about Namibia's Mixed Martial Arts, or MAA team, having intensified preparations for the Mixed Martial Arts Championships in Abu Dhabi, amongst other sports stories, as Fikile Lingwati gives us the details.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. We begin with rugby news. The Springbok Sevens A team claimed the Rugby Africa Sevens Cup in Port Louis. The South Africans won the Mauritius tournament played at the Labodane Sports Club over the weekend with a 26-12 victory over Madagascar in the final. Earlier on Sunday, they beat Zimbabwe 19-12 in the semi-finals and defending champions Uganda 26-0 in the quarterfinals. Police box coach Philip Snyman says this was a good effort and he's happy with the way the squad applied themselves and executed their duties. Now, tennis news. Carlos Alcaraz has warned his Wimbledon rivals that he feels great on grass after the world number 2 defied his own expectations by winning the Queen's Club title for a second time. Alcaraz battled to a bruising 75, 6-7, 5-7, 6-2 victory over Czech world number 30 Jiří Lehenčka in the final of the Wimbledon warm-up event. The 22-year-old has extended his career-best winning streak to 18 matches, putting him in the perfect position to defend his Wimbledon title. Alcaraz says he came without expectations.
Well, yeah, honestly, it feels great. Obviously, it's been a really positive and incredible week that I had this week. It's always great, you know, getting titles, winning tournaments, but doing it here in Queens, I think it's a little bit special, you know. Yeah, for the second time, you know, in my career. Winning here at Queens, it is a week that I didn't have expectations at all. Honestly, I came here just to try to feel more comfortable on grass, just getting used to it, and ended up lifting the trophy. It's a special moment for me, for my team.
And Namibia's mixed martial arts MMA team has intensified preparations as they gear up for the International Mixed Martial Arts Federation, the IMMAF Youth World Championships in Abu Dhabi from the 21st to the 27th of July. This year's event is said to be the biggest youth amateur MMA event in history, welcoming young athletes from around the globe to compete for the prestige of the IMMAF Gold. And football news, Real Madrid shrugged off an early red card to defeat Mexico's Pachuca 3-1 and take a big step towards the knockout stage of the Club World Cup on Sunday. The result leaves Madrid under new head coach Xavi Alonso on top of Group H with 4 points, while Pachuca are eliminated after 2 defeats. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fidel Nwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
And now let's get the latest from the world of business. Here is Tabiso Lihuku with economics news.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Asanda, and good morning. Mozambique's energy minister says that the government has not received a request from Total Energies to lift a force majeure declaration on its $20 billion liquefied natural gas project there, but said he is optimistic about the oil major's plan to resume its development. The force majeure will be lifted as soon as the project's operator determines conditions are in place to resume operations. Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy Estevo Pele said this on the sidelines of a meeting with Japan's Industry Minister Muto Yoji. The plant will have an annual capacity of 13.12 million metric tons. The ongoing conflict between Israel and Iran risks pushing up fuel prices if it intensifies. South Africa's Minerals and Petroleum Resources Minister Gwede Mantashe says if the war intensifies, it could be difficult to move oil, leading to higher prices. Israel and Iran have been exchanging strikes for about a week now, leading to devastation and adding to global economic uncertainty. Mantashe comments.
There's a body called OPEC. OPEC is a collection of all producing countries in the world, and that is where we get our oil. But the reality of the matter is that if that conflict intensifies, it's going to push the price of petrol up, and people must expect that it will push the price of petrol up because moving oil is going to be much more difficult and more complex than it was earlier.
The Lungelo Letu Human Rights Foundation has lambasted South African banks for selling properties at a fraction of their market worth to recoup costs from defaulting home loan holders. The foundation has accused banks of initiating legal action for repossession even when homeowners are actively reducing their areas. They say by imposing excessive legal costs on homeowners, the legal fees end up surpassing the actual home loan debt. The foundation is part of a group leading the $3.4 billion class action against major banks in the country. Its president, Nkululeko Elitole, says banks are failing to engage meaningfully with customers before resorting to court action.
It's terrible when people are being repossessed of their houses. We are dealing with thousands and thousands of people who have lost their houses through auction. And before 2018, houses were sold at footstools. But from 2018 August, we took the banks to court, whereby the houses now must be sold at its current value.
Delegates at the 2025 Commonwealth Trade Ministers Meeting and Business Summit in Windhoek, Namibia, have agreed that global trade is facing headwinds. Trade ministers, diplomats and stakeholders had gathered to review the outcomes and plan the next steps for implementation. The meeting officially concluded on Friday. Samoa's Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Fiame Naomi Matafa.
The Samoan Prime Minister and Chair in Office, in her opening remarks to this distinguished gathering, called for a united response, a Commonwealth response to the key challenges we face, especially on the escalating geopolitical and trade tensions and the challenges confronting the global trading system.
Oil prices have jumped to their highest since January as the United States' weekend move to join Israel in attacking Iran's nuclear facilities stoked supply worries. Brent crude futures was up $1.92 or 2.49% at $78.93 a barrel. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude advanced to $1.89 or 2.56 to $75.73. And look at your financial indicators. At this hour, the dollar in Nigeria is trading at 547 naira. In Botswana, it's at 13 pula 33. Kenya, 128 shilling 568. And Zambia, 23 kwacha 9. The BRICS countries, in Brazil, the dollar is trading at 5 ril 51. Russia, 78 rubles 39. India, 86 rupees 49. China, 7 yuan 18. And here in South Africa, the dollar is trading at 17 rand 99 cents. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Gold $3,361. Platinum $1,267 per ounce. Brent crude oil $78.29 a barrel. For any business stories you would like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg, I'm Tabiso Lohoko.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África, com Remo Samo e João Yabalá.
O surto da cólera em Angola tem causado grande preocupação, afetando já mais de metade das províncias do país. Simultaneamente, a Agência dos Estados Unidos para o Desenvolvimento Internacional, USAID, um dos maiores doadores mundiais de assistência humanitária, decidiu não priorizar os países com maior incidência de malária. Para discutirmos as causas do alastramento da cólera em Angola e os impactos dessa decisão da USAID, convidamos o Dr. Jeremias Agostinho, médico e mestre em saúde pública, para partilhar a sua visão sobre o tema.
A doença, nesse momento, representa o maior risco de saúde pública que nós temos. Nos últimos anos, a nossa preocupação esteve sempre centrada com os casos de malária, os casos de tuberculose e também de infecção por VIH-Sida. A forma como, em pouco menos de 2 meses, os casos de cólera vêm aumentando, acaba por representar, nessa altura, um dos maiores desafios que o país tem. É expectável que, nesta fase, o número de casos venha a aumentar.
De segunda a sexta-feira, das 20 às 21 horas locais, este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
Tunisia's High Commissioner to South Africa, Karima Badawi, has underscored the importance of strengthened collaboration between Tunisia and South Africa in tackling critical water management challenges. Badawi was speaking to Channel Africa at a seminar on the role of science, diplomacy on knowledge and expertise sharing held at Pretoria's Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, or the CSIR, International Convention Centre. She emphasized the need for joint action aligned with global frameworks like the UN Sustainable Development Goals number 6 and the African Union's Agenda 2063, while calling for education and innovation to address climate change and ensure sustainable water access for future generations. Channel Africa's reporter Michael Mbewe spoke to Ambassador Karima Badawi.
Este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África.
O surto da cólera em Angola tem causado grande preocupação, afetando já mais de metade das províncias do país. Simultaneamente, a Agência dos Estados Unidos para o Desenvolvimento Internacional, USAID, um dos maiores doadores mundiais de assistência humanitária, decidiu não priorizar os países com maior incidência de malária. Para discutirmos as causas do alastramento da cólera em Angola e os impactos dessa decisão da USAID, convidamos o Dr. Jeremias Agostinho, médico e mestre em saúde pública, para partilhar a sua visão sobre o tema.
A doença, nesse momento, representa o maior risco de saúde pública que nós temos. Nos últimos anos, a nossa preocupação esteve sempre centrada com os casos de malária, os casos de tuberculose e também de infecção por VIH-Sida. A forma como, em pouco menos de 2 meses, os casos de cólera vêm aumentando, acaba por representar, nessa altura, um dos maiores desafios que o país tem. É expectável que, nesta fase, o número de casos venha a aumentar.
De segunda a sexta-feira, das 20 às 21 horas locais, este é o Caleidoscópio do Canal África. 50 anos atrás, Moçambique ergueu-se. Do peso da guerra e dos sussurros de liberdade. Ao grito da independência, não foi fácil. A luta foi longa. O custo elevado, mas o espírito inquebrável. Hoje, Moçambique celebra 50 anos de liberdade. Do Rovuma ao Maputo, do Zimbábue.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to point out the importance of the collaboration between Tunisia and South Africa. And especially, I have to pay tribute to all the efforts done by the Department of Science and Innovation, because they are really supportive, they are very, very supportive, and helping us also to, why not, to try to have a new significance of what is water diplomacy, what is science diplomacy, and also to boost our cooperation on all fields, not only bilateral but also multilateral. As you may know, actually South Africa is very, very busy with the chairmanship of the G20. They have a lot of meetings, but they managed to have like a time for us in order just to raise out a very, very important issue. It's about water. How can we access to water, the impact of not having access to water? Why not go through the SDG 6, the Agenda 2030 of the United Nations, and also the Agenda 2063 of the African Union agenda? So this is very important for us, to just not only to show support, to raise difficulties, but also to just, pay tribute and also try to, why not only touch the science and innovation fields, but all other fields in order just to show that even if you are on the northern part of Africa, you are on the southern part, but you are very close, we have the same issues, and then we can do a lot when we are together. So thank you, South Africa, for hosting us. Thank you for all the team from my embassy, and also thank you for my senior professors who came from Tunisia in order just only to share experiences with you and with us.
But also this collaboration signifies the good relations between the two countries, and then also exemplifying that you need each other in terms of finding solutions, because as you have said that our problems are the same, but we can't resolve them in isolation.
Of course, yes, definitely. Indeed, it's very important for us to cooperate together, to try to, these kind of gatherings gave us and will give us the opportunity to point out the problems and then find solutions. Because when you saw all the people, the speakers, and then also the moderators, they all go with one conclusion: we need to work together, just to face all our challenges, all our issues. We are all part of Africa, and then together we can really do a lot. Tunisia and South Africa, we celebrated last year 30 years of diplomatic relations. And then I'm sure that we can do a lot together. We have a very busy schedule with the Department of Science and Innovation, but with the other also departments. We are proud of that. And then cross fingers. This is only the beginning, and then a lot of good things, I think, are coming.
Your country also experienced what we're experiencing here. What is it that you did to end that problem?
I think we have a lot of programs. So actually, you know that we dedicated a state secretary only for water issues. Just to let you know, under the chapeau of the Ministry of Agriculture, we have like an agenda just to try to raise the problem of water and awareness also. You know that we need to start from the beginning, from schools, just not to tell them, no, don't waste water, be careful. We have this big problem of climate change. And I think that we start from the beginning, and in Tunisia, we are really doing our best in order just to educate people. No waste water. You don't have to waste water. Be careful. This is not only for us, but for the generations to come.
That was Tunisia's High Commissioner to South Africa, Karima Badawi, speaking to Channel Africa's Michael Mbewe.
Now, a 2-day glamping expo, which was held in Johannesburg, South Africa, concluded at the weekend. The event brought together glamping companies and enthusiasts from across the country, and it's an annual platform for businesses across the glamping value chain to showcase their glamping innovations and products, network with industry peers, and seek potential collaborations and investments. Sisi Sechalo attended the last day of the expo and has more on the story. Let's find out what glamping is.
It is regarded as the glamour of camping, hence the word glam. Glamping caters for individuals seeking unique, luxurious camping experiences amidst nature. Whether you are in search of luxury tents with hotel amenities, scents to make your tent smell divine, eco-friendly lights, even travel agents who can guide you through the glamping journey were all represented at the expo. Clary Travel Agency was founded in 2011 and is based in Soweto in the Gauteng province of South Africa. The company was one of the exhibitors at the Glamping Expo. They deal with domestic and international travel from luxury to middle and budget. The director of the company, Vivian Hlaisi, says they deal mostly with government as their clients. She states why glamping is now the business to look at.
It's something which is new for our travelers, but then it's something which it can be affordable and trying something new compared to like your hotels and people who do not want to spend too much. So it's something to try out, and believe me, you'll always be going back.
Canvas Republic is a movable tenting company which is located in the Free State province of South Africa, but travel across the country, meaning they can set up their tents anywhere. Lebohang Sinamela Sibiso is responsible for marketing and client relations at the company. She describes why glamping is the way to go.
I feel like our goals and future endeavors align with Glamping Expo, because as much as camping is known to be backpacking camping only, we want to reintroduce another side of camping to say, let's bring home away from home. Glamp in style and comfortable. It doesn't have to be hard rock, bathing in the river, or, sleeping on the floor. Let's bring home in the bush, within nature, and explore.
The Glamping Expo is the nexus for this evolving industry, providing a unified platform for stakeholders to showcase their offering and discuss emerging trends. As the new entrant in the tourism business, how sustainable is glamping? And do investors and funders have an appetite for it? Mila Matola from Milvest Advisory, a tourism advisory company that help businesses with, amongst others, marketing strategies, tourism master plans, capital raising and investor facilitation, says there's a market for glamping.
Yeah, look, I think it's a new thing, but it's a niche market that's responding to a need that is there currently. A need in terms of people wanting to go out into the broad, wide outdoors. The need, for instance, for rural development, the need for inclusion of other communities. And so it's a niche market that is responding to those considerations when it comes to investment or financing. But it is responding to a need that consumers are driving very strongly. Today's consumers want authentic experiences. They want experiences which are immersive, which means that they want to connect with the local people. They want to connect with nature. But they also want authentic experiences. And to a large extent, the glamping does provide that.
For Channel Africa, I'm Sisi Sekhalo in Johannesburg, South Africa.
The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, has entered into economic development with 3 of its development partners, that's Spain, Germany, and the European Union, as it deepens the efforts to ensure adequate security and good governance. The agreement, signed in Abuja ahead of the 67th summit of the Authority of Heads of State, is worth over 150 million euros to be provided by the development partners and managed through a number of flawless checks and balances so that the impact will be felt in the areas where it is needed. Channel Africa's news correspondent in Nigeria, Collins Nosa Atohengbe, has more.
The agreement signed ahead of 2 important gatherings of the regional body, the Youth Development and the 67th Summit of the Authorities of Heads of States and Government of Member Nations, attracted 100 million euros from Spain, while Germany and the European Union will jointly give the balance of 50 million euros on equal shares. The specifics were reached after an arduous discussion where the modalities that will enable citizens of ECOWAS to feel the impact of the planned projects were explained by the president of the Regional Bodies Commission, Omar Toure, during the signing of the agreement at the ECOWAS headquarters in Abuja. Toure noted that in the past, much attention and resources was directed towards holding seminars and workshops, leaving so little for the provision of relevant infrastructural development that could impact on the people within the region. He called for a reduction of such activities and greater attention to be given to projects implementation.
Let us focus on delivery. Let us focus on concrete results on the ground. Let us reduce workshops. Let us reduce trainings. Let us reduce validation activities, validation workshops. It beats the imagination of all of us to see the amount of resources we dedicate to training and overtraining. I think we need to be frank as partners and focus on delivery on the ground. We should not reduce these partnerships to workshops, and workshops.
Speaking of our country's relationship with development efforts in West Africa at the occasion, the Spanish ambassador to Nigeria, Maria Valesco, whose country is to provide the 100 million euros of the budget's fund, noted that ECOWAS has shown the desire to grow and overcome the challenges of insecurity and constraints of development. She commended the regional body for the continued efforts and says the agreement being signed between it and the West African body will go a long way to making sure that the expectations of the people of West Africa are satisfactorily completed.
Today, ECOWAS stands as a powerful example of this long-term vision. In a world facing growing uncertainty, this region continues to pursue its vision of a peaceful and prosperous area governed by strong institutions that uphold fundamental freedoms and promote inclusive and sustainable development.
Germany, on its part, expressed the belief that regional integration will promote economic development and political stability, among other requirements that will help to promote peace and prosperity.
Right, it's a little bit before 9 o'clock, which means it's time to find out what is happening in On the Move. And Palace is in studio.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy Monday. All right, today on The Move, we speak about food wastage in the first hour of the show. And we know that it's one of the most pressing global challenges of our time, especially in a time when we think about sustainability. One of the industries that contribute really highly to food wastage is the restaurant industry, because there are, food policies about food that's been used and that needs to be gotten rid of each and every day. There's a lot of food wastage. But there's a new app app in South Africa that's quite incredible. It's called Refreshy, and they ensure that good food finds a home rather than a landfill. And this app is one that anyone can download, and every day these restaurants will post the food that they have left over, surplus food for the day, that they will sell to people at unprecedented prices. So really, really low prices, and you can just go and fetch it, and they don't have to waste the food, and people can, eat the food and get the food. So even if it's your best baked goods for the day that, will be, stale by tomorrow. So we'll be chatting to Jacob Holberg, CEO and founder of Refreshy, to tell us a little bit more about this incredible app. And then we go into our African View debate in the second hour of the show. I don't know, but when I was younger, if I'm doing something, perhaps, for example, if I'm standing in the street corner and I'm smoking a cigarette, any parent who sees me would probably hit me upside the head and say, "What are you doing?" And we were raised in Africa in that communal parenting situation, but that's changed quite a lot. African View debate. Should it take a village to raise a child? Should still have communal parenting? And we'll be chatting to Nomveli Sombanga, team coach and indigenous knowledge systems practitioner, who says, I think it's something that we should bring back. And we'll also be speaking to Ronke Posh Adeyinki, parenting coach and school leader, saying, but there are also legal implications and a lot of issues with that these days. So that's going to be our debate for the day. And then we move on to our fitness and nutrition corner in today's final hour, speaking about going vegetarian, plant-based food eating.
Okay, I'm interested in the health thing because it's starting today, my mission.
Are you going vegetarian?
I don't know about vegetarian, but certainly eating properly.
Okay. You need protein for waking up in this early hour show, so maybe don't go fully vegetarian.
Yeah. So that's on the move, and from me and Asanda, we're out of here.
Goodbye. We'll check in with you tomorrow, 6 till 9, and do stay with Channel Africa for On the Move.
It's 9 o'clock. It's time for your news. Here's Joelani Tulongwepe.
Cinquenta anos atrás, Moçambique ergueu-se. Do peso da guerra e dos sussurros de liberdade, ao grito da